that the other day. Before everybody gets in here, let's talk about that. Great play. It's been taking place here in Astoria for 38 years. And I originally saw this play probably 20 years ago. And it is one of the funniest things you can ever watch if you're here in Astoria. Definitely take a moment to go and see the Shanghai play if you can. Um, a lot of changes have taken place to this play. I remember originally there was a lot of really bad jokes, in fact, jokes that might even be offensive, and they seem to have censored it a little bit. From what I can tell from the original, plays or the original ones that I had seen 20 years ago. But they are still, it was a really funny show. Took the boys to see it. They laughed hysterically at it. It's a lot of fun because you get to throw popcorn and yell at the villain, and it's a lot of like crowd participation. You get to sing along, and just really get like deep involved into the play. Anyway, a lot of fun for me. And we are up to 60 right away. Awesome. Let's talk about the Federal Reserve and this recent speech that had come from Powell. I'll leave a link down in the description for you guys. Now, something interesting that I have taken from this speech after I read it is that the Federal Reserve is going to try and kill the jobs market. That is really what their end goal is. And if you go and read through it, they talk about a lot of stuff. They talk about supply and demand, and they talk about uh, pretty much how it is that the Federal Reserve really only has one tool. In fact, let me think, how did they say it? The Fed's tools work principally on aggregate demand. Like, they don't really have any real effect when it comes to supply. Although I have a different opinion on that when it comes to the effect that they have on interest rates and what entrepreneurs would be willing to take out as far as loans to make things happen within the economy. But anyway, that's beside the point. um, when we think about the labor market right now, it's an incredibly tight labor market. And when you have an incredibly tight labor market, then the labor starts demanding more money. Like, I even heard of just a regular waitressing job where they wanted $25 an hour plus the tips on top of it. And I'm thinking, geez, for a waitressing job. And it wasn't at some crazy fancy restaurant somewhere. It was just like a regular, service job. And although that might seem like a regular pay in some areas, in my area, that's would seem quite high for a waitressing job. But that's the kind of thing that people are asking for and actually being offered in a lot of areas just to keep the doors open and keep the services going. They're offering a lot of money for it. And this is really what's going to drive inflation, because the more money that is paid out to the labor, then the more the business has to charge for either the service or the product that's out there. And then that starts feeding into it, as the people who are needing to buy those goods and services out there have to pay ever increasing amounts of money, which then makes them demand more money for their hourly wages. And so this inflation expectation is really where the problem starts to kick in, is that is what causes inflation, as it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, as people are just expecting to have to pay more going into the future. So having a tight labor market is really where the Fed's problem is. And they state it. In this speech, he says it straight up. He says, the labor market is particularly strong, but it is clearly out of balance, with demand for workers substantially exceeding the supply of available workers. So there's nothing they can do about changing the worker supply, right? I mean, I guess you can allow more immigration to happen and you might get more workers going that way. But as far as adjusting the amount of workers that are out there, that's not as easy to adjust as how many businesses there are out there. And that's really where I feel that the Federal Reserve is going to start trying to take out some of these zombie corporations. And now this is something that we have talked about quite a bit, is how these zombie corporations came into an existence. And a lot of people want examples of zombie corporations. You can see them happening all over the place. Like Peloton was a great example of it, as it had far exceeded into logistics and trying to figure out what it was going to do about supply chain and getting stuff to the people, not realizing that the demand for their product was going to fall off a cliff as the economy opened back up. There wasn't going to be this huge demand for all these stationary bikes and at-home exercise equipment and stuff like that. So these are the type of things that start to emerge as time goes on. These heavily indebted corporations that just wouldn't exist or don't exist if it wasn't for the ever increasing amounts of debt. And if they can't pay that debt, they start to fail. Those are zombie corporations. There's zombie people out there, and zombie nations. There's like zombies all over the place who are going to expose themselves as unhealthy, financed, indebted people. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it, but it's going to be ugly for them once they can't pay their debts. So back during the pandemic, when the Federal Reserve was trying to support households and businesses, and that's another thing that he calls it in here, the stimulus package. Now think about it, stimulus, like getting high, like getting an injection of drugs or something like that. That's the same thing that the Federal Reserve is talking about, because in the speech he talks about the pain coming to households and businesses. So the exact opposite of what was taking place during the pandemic, where they were stimulating households and businesses, supporting them, they said, right? Getting them drunk and stoned. That's support, right? So anyhow, the Federal Reserve during that time had set up those special purpose vehicles and then told everybody they were going to be buying corporate debt, which got everybody to start diving into corporate debt. And that was like supporting those businesses out there, because everybody was pretty much supporting these households, or not the households so much as supporting the businesses by buying into that corporate debt, thinking that the Federal Reserve was going to be buying into it as well, and that they were going to front run the Federal Reserve. But the Federal Reserve really didn't do anything except for put out that credible threat. So once they had done that, they had pretty much given these corporations a lot of money. They were sitting on a lot of cash once everybody started diving into this corporate debt. And then these corporations started like, what do you do with it? Well, you start expanding. You start hiring more employees. You start buying more equipment or doing whatever it is that you do to expand your business. And employment was one of that. Well, now it's time to cut the employment, because we have the labor market is particularly strong, but is clearly out of balance with the demand of workers substantially exceeding the supply of available workers. So too much work out there for the available workers. Got to cut the work off, because that's the only thing they can really do. They can't change anything else about it. There's going to be workers or there's not going to be workers, unless people like just leave, or you bring people in, immigration. So anyway, I have been babbling on for 7 minutes now. How many people? 235, 53 likes. Please go and hit that like button. You know I never ask you guys to like the videos unless it's a live stream, and that's only because it gets the algorithm to pick up the video and send it out there for more people to come in here and chat in the comment section. So let's see here. They have reverse engineered what people think. Yeah, that's for sure. Uneducated, I can't even say my own name. Uneducated economist starts saying what is my dude pandemic. Yeah, that's what you guys are for. That's what the comment section is for. I try to keep it as neutral as possible so that it doesn't get swayed and argumentative and stuff like that. Like, I mean, it was pretty obvious to me that if it didn't, the Federal Reserve and the Treasuries, or the government anyway, because it was the Fed and the Treasury working together to get the special purpose vehicle set up. But if they didn't have that, if they didn't have that, the pandemic, then they wouldn't have had the unusual and exigent circumstance. And we would never be in this position of having these zombie corporations now like heavily indebted and sucking up all the best, well, I don't know about the best, but sucking up a bunch of talent and resources and stuff they shouldn't even exist. So had the pandemic not taken place, and had the Federal Reserve not had the capabilities of setting up those special purpose vehicles, we would not be in the position that we are in today. But nobody wants to talk about that stuff. They just talk about like, hey, this is where we are and what do we do about it? You know? And the only thing to do about it is, like the Federal Reserve says, increase the pain. And that's what people are going to have to feel. And you feel pain when you take stimulus away, because if you're getting drunk or high, you don't feel the pain. UE, keep the rates low. Keep the rates low for, I don't know, I don't think the rates are going to stay low. Yeah. Are you selling lots of lumber at the minute? Surprisingly, yes. There is a lot of lumber starting to go out. People are building a lot more decks. The idea of doing like remodels or additions, is starting to increase. Getting a lot more like, I haven't been selling a lot of doors and windows, like the replacement kind of style. I think that's because of how long it takes to get windows in. I have been selling a few more doors lately, so it looks like the remodeling is starting to pick up a little bit more. But definitely the deck packages, because the lumber prices of pressure treated have dropped gee whiz, I can't talk, have dropped substantially. So yeah, I've been selling quite a bit of lumber as far as that goes. Laugh out loud. All nighter, yes. I just got a call on how the new counterbalance blinds I installed work. Just lift or pull. All right. It's easy for rich YouTubers to talk about how the middle class workers should lose their jobs to fight inflation. Whoa. I don't know who you're talking, but I have a retail job where I stand at a counter and I ring customers up. So I don't know if you're talking about me or other YouTubers out there, but I'm just calling it as I see it. Like, I'm not saying that it should happen or shouldn't happen. This is just what I think is going to happen, and good, bad, or ugly, it doesn't make any difference to what my opinion is. It's what you think is going to happen and what you should do with your own life and your own decisions on that. I mean, granted, my life has changed because of YouTube, and I think, I'm really thankful for having it. Don't get me wrong, and I mean, so is the family. We're very appreciative of everything that it's done. But don't think that I haven't forgotten what it's like to be, completely broke, and it's actually hard to get out of that mindset. Like, it's one of the reasons why I'm still driving a 99 Corolla. I mean, I could go buy a new car if I wanted to, but I just can't seem to bring myself to do it. All right, calling 7 on the dice. Yeah. All right. Mind me asking what part of Hawaii you're from. I hope I can do a jiu-jitsu tournament there and just see the place someday. The Hawaiians kick ass in MMA. Yeah, mom spent I pretty much have been in the Pacific Northwest my whole life. Mom spent a great deal of time on the Big Island, uh, over near Ocean View, and that's where I would hang out with her. It's funny that the Fed is trying to type money, but the government keeps spending more and more. Well, go and look at the. It is true that they're going into deficit. They're spending more, but if you go and you look at the deficit spending from the USDebtClock.org, and you're going to see that it's actually falling. That the amount of spending beyond how much we're budgeted for is falling. We're still spending more than we should, but it's starting to come down, the over amount that we're spending. Does that make sense? I don't know, but anyway, it's not good. It's still not good, but it's better than it was. I don't know how to say it. Anyway, why would the Fed allow us to get to this point if they had an interest rate in doing? It had an interest in doing the right thing. Well, I'm not sure exactly what it is that, I mean, if the question as far as like doing the right thing for who, like in what position are you needing to be in order for it to be the right thing? I mean, it might be the right thing for the Federal Reserve to continue to raise interest rates for somebody who can save a lot of cash and put that cash towards savings and get an interest rate towards it. This might be the right thing. Like for somebody else who's heavily indebted and those interest rates rising, it's going to be very painful for them. Then it's not the right thing. I mean, it's not a right or wrong thing. It's the position that you happen to be in at the time that the decisions are made. So, I mean, really, the Federal Reserve was meant to was they were meant to be an elastic money supply, right? So when the economy started to expand and things were getting heated up and there was a lot of transactions taking place and there wasn't enough currency in the system, the Federal Reserve was going to be there to expand the money supply to deal with this heating up economy and provide more money to the system because you needed more currency out there. And then do the exact opposite as the economy slowed down. So as the economy slowed down, they had pulled this money out of the system. That was the original idea of the Federal Reserve and what they were supposed to do, right? Be part of this elastic money supply to keep things more stable. And obviously that didn't work out too well. Here it is 100 years later, and as the economy is completely in shambles, and slowing down, they tried to stimulate it by doing quantitative easings and promoting of people like taking out debt to try and go out there and buy houses and cars and go on vacation and do stuff like that. I mean, it wasn't necessarily their job in the original days to even do anything at all. They were just supposed to be part of the elastic money supply during the business cycle, but that's not the case anymore. Now they're like trying to manipulate the entire thing as far as providing support to households and businesses during times of economic downturns. And that wasn't necessarily what their intentions were in the early days. So I'm not sure exactly what the right thing would be. It's just more the position that you are in during the time that they happen to try and do things to bring whatever they think is stability to the markets, or not to the markets, to prices and jobs, because they're mandated to do two things: low and stable prices and full employment. That's their mandate. And so that's what they're attempting to do. And if they can't succeed in that, then they're failing at whatever they have to do. Stuff they have to like start behaving in different fashions in order to try and create that situation. They knew that deflation was going to problem. We've covered this many times. There is a great speech by John Williams called Monetary Policy for a Low Neutral Interest Rate World. And if you have not read that speech, I mean, I've gone over it so many times. I don't think I have it in here, but I've gone over so many times. And John Williams talks about deflation and that being the real problem. And that was in November of 2018. All throughout 2019, we knew there was a problem. I mean, we even had the inverted yield curve taking place. People were screaming recession, and then we had the pandemic, and everybody forgot that there was going to be a recession because the pandemic caused the recession, right? It was the pandemic-induced recession. They said it over and over and over again. So everybody believed it, and then now here we are. All right. Supplies are coming through the ports and rails and slow clots. Yeah, and it'll continue. I mean, and that's like, I said it a while ago. Once all the mandates had come to an end, once all the restrictions, like the mask mandates, the distancing, all that other stuff, once that all came to an end and people weren't thinking about it anymore, then you would see the supply chain start to free up. And it's what we're starting to see. I mean, it's not free flowing like it once was, because it was damaged. I mean, once you have broken the system, it takes a long time for it to get reestablished. For as long as it's been breaking, it's going to take that much longer, if not longer, to repair itself. But it will happen. I mean, and it's only a matter of time. If prices really start to substantially drop and people are taking advantage of that, then you'll see stuff start flowing through the system. I mean, there's no better way to get products to move than to drop the prices of it. And you're already starting to see it happen. I mean, it's not happening in the things that people wanted to, like food and fuel or rent or even home prices. I mean, they are starting to come down, but not substantially, not to the point that, you can actually say that there's like a deflationary scenario in that. But just go and look at like some of the things that people don't need anymore, like TVs and furniture and clothing and all kinds of stuff out there. There's good prices on a lot of that stuff out there at the department stores. And people are reporting to me all the time how they see like containers just stacked up all over, like near the Walmarts and Targets and stuff like that near their hometowns. Anyway. Hey, I got a super chat there. Where did that go? Let's see that. Oh, there it is. Thank you very much, Local Enterprise Broadcasting, for the $9.99. Here comes dough from my favorite economic realist. Most people on YouTube are fear pornographers. Yeah, I like throwing the fear porn out there every once in a while, but it's not really me. I mean, it's like I don't try to work off of that kind of emotional thought. And I mean, because I'm already kind of like, I won't get into that. But I try not to work off of that emotional thought and try to look at things very realistically and try to think of it as like from many perspectives. Like if you were, dirt poor, if you were super rich, if you were just the average guy, how would you feel about this? And I try to look at things from a lot of perspectives. So yeah, I do thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Ruben, thank you very much for the $9.99. UE with the bear market, crypto market. Have you heard about the hex? It's like Bitcoin, but with proof of stake. I would greatly appreciate it if you could provide some insight to this. Sorry, Ruben, I am not. I've been meaning to go on and talk with the hex guys in the community and all that other stuff to learn a little bit more about it, but I am not terribly familiar with the hex coin. Much appreciated, UE. Yeah, you're welcome, Derek. Thank you. All right, mega depression. Yeah, it could happen. Yeah. Hey, UE. Heard of this thing called quiet quitting? Yeah. So I've read quite a bit about this quiet quitting, and to be perfectly honest with you, I've actually seen that take place. And I hate to say, but I think there's been times in my life that I have quietly quit now that I look back on it. Um, and if you're not familiar with quietly quitting, it's when you still show up for work, but you do the absolute bare minimum that you can get away with. And I hate to admit it, but like I said, it was a bad time in my life. But you do the absolute bare minimum that you could possibly do without like actually getting fired or anything else. Like you don't really care about the other employees and how much work they have to do, because your lack of actually doing anything, but you just show up, you only answer the phone if you are the absolute have to answer the phone because there's nobody else picking it up, or do like, whatever it is, you just like, just basically do the absolute bare minimum and get away with it, and then you go and live your life normally. So it's like as if you had quit your job, but you still show up and collect the paycheck. That's it. And it's funny because people talk about quietly quitting, and I'm thinking, man, I know people whose lives are just like that. They didn't quietly quit, they quietly started that way. Like that's just the way they are. But there's other people who were like really good employees who really enjoyed their job, but then like, for whatever reason, they got frustrated with it and they wanted to quit their job, but didn't actually quit because they needed the paycheck. So they just stopped doing things. They would show up and just do the bare minimum, and that's it. Hold on, I need to put a sun shield or else my phone will cook. Hey, right on. 400 of you up in here. Thank you very much. With 400 of you, there should be a lot more likes. Go and hit the like button, please. That will pick up the algorithm will pick up the video and start sending it around for more people to get into the chat. So I hope that doesn't fall. All right. Isn't quiet quitting supposed to be where you only do your original job duties and stop doing above and beyond, and so many employers demanding employees expand their duties with pay expansion? Yeah, I guess that's another way of looking at it. Let's see. Do your job or quit. Yeah. The 5-year is above the 30-year again. Yeah, see, now there we go. Let's talk about that, because that quiet quitting stuff. I mean, like I said, when I was looking back on it, I was just more like just in a depressive state who didn't really want to do anything. So it wasn't like I was like pissed off at my job or something like that. I was just pissed off at life. So I mean, and I have to thank my employer at the time, because he put up with it for a while, and then I eventually got out of it. But it did take a while. Okay, 5-year above the 30-year again. Yeah, that's something to really think about, because that was the indicator that I have been following, because that was what Alan Greenspan's response was when somebody asked him about the 2-year, 10-year and being the indicator for a recession. He said, although it's a very good indicator for a recession, he said he follows the 5-year, 30-year. And when you see the 5-year, 30-year, the spread between the 5-year, 30-year grow, that is corporate management's willingness to invest. And so if I think about that in the reverse, like if you see the 5-year, 30-year, like the spread of that shrink or even invert like it is now, or did it actually invert, or was it like just really close to inverting? But anyway, it doesn't matter. When you see that shrink or actually invert, that would be like corporate management's non-willingness to invest, right? Wouldn't you look at it that way? So that's what I have to think about. It's just like, okay, so if the 5-year, 30-year, and that spread is shrinking, then that is not a good sign as far as how far we are into like the recession. That is like a bad sign. When you see that start to expand, that 5-year, 30-year, then you know that's corporate management's willingness to invest. And that's probably the time that we have moved out of the recession. Anyway, that 5-year, 30-year inverted before the 2-year, 10-year did. And to me, that's a much better indicator to follow as far as where we're going to be in coming out of the recession, going back into like economic expansion again, or in a way that people are expecting, where things are hot and heavy and awesome or something like that. I would imagine that we would see that 5-year, 30-year expanding, with the idea that corporate management is willing to invest into that. Hi Simon, how much should a 1 ounce silver coin round be on average? I don't know. I mean, I think it's probably better to look at it as a ratio to gold and how close this ratio is, because they pull it out of the ground somewhere around 10-to-1 ratio, but yet it trades on the market at what, like, I don't know, 70-to-1, 80-to-1, something like that. I haven't checked it in a while. But when you think about it in that fashion, it was just like, why is it trading so far out of whack when it comes to the ratio? Like, it should be closer to a 10-to-1. Like, if you just look at it from the gold perspective, if it's 10-to-1 ratio, then it should be like $170 an ounce. And then if you think about it from like an industrial consumption part of things, because from what I understand, the industry provides how am I saying this? 50% of what the industry provides goes to industrial use, which is like consumed. So that only leaves like a 5-to-1 ratio for investors to buy, which then takes it up to what? Well over $300 an ounce. So what should an ounce of silver really be? I don't know, somewhere between $18 and $300 an ounce. I don't know. I really don't know where it should be. Somewhere in there. Quiet quitting sounds like living in limbo. Not for me. Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. I mean, if you are spending 8 hours of your day, like, it's one thing, like I heard of somebody doing 2 remote working jobs at the same time. Like, they were supposed to be like remote working, but they're working 2 jobs at once. And I thought to myself, man, that is the way to go about it. And somebody was kind of getting like, I guess they had got upset with that, saying, well, they're not doing their work completely and it's forcing like more work onto the other employees. But then I thought to myself, well, that's kind of like quietly quitting all on its own. Like, I mean, they could fire that person, but they don't. They keep them hired, and whether they're not, performing up to what the other employees think is substantial work, it is enough for them to get paid to do it. So, if they figured out a way to get paid 2 times for working at the same, or getting paid twice to work at the same time, whatever. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I necessarily agree with it. Like, you're kind of promising to dedicate your thoughts to one subject, one individual, or one job. But if you can get away with it, I guess why not? You're remote working. We'd like to talk about quiet quitting. Huh? Quiet quitting is wanting to get unemployment, doesn't pay the bills. Yeah. Thank you for answering my question. Very kind. Hope you're having a great Saturday. I am. Thank you very much for being here. I do appreciate it. I've done it too. Yeah, I think everybody's probably, I mean, everybody's kind of done it at least at some point in their life, even if it was just for a few weeks, where you're just, something happens in your life where you're just down and you're just not feeling it. If work is getting done, then what's the big deal? Yeah, that's kind of what it comes down to. Like, talking about the person who having 2 jobs at the same time doing remote work. Yeah, if the job is getting done, then what's the big deal? That's ultimately what it comes down to, and that's the employer's decision to make. Like, it's them who is giving up their money for your time, and if somebody else doesn't approve, it's none of their business, right? I mean, even if it is causing more work on them, then it's up to them to go find another job, to say, what, this isn't fair, I'm not doing it. That's their choice to make as well. But if they decide that they want to take another job too, then it's up to them, and they can work 2 jobs at once. All-nighter, true. Are you talking with somebody there? True, but 8-hour job is about half a person's life while awake, so half a limbo. Yeah. Let's see here. Have you talked about the food shortages, Huey? I have in the past, but to be honest with you, I am still waiting to see the actual effects from it. It's really difficult for me to because I'm not in a farming district, where people are farmers and talking about some of the experiences they are having with fuel prices and stuff like that. I'm not, I'm like, the farming industry that I'm in is the timber industry. So that's what I know about it, and that's what I talked about. And if you didn't go see that, if you haven't watched the interviews with Keta from Madison's Lumber Report, even if you're not into lumber, those what Keta has to say is just incredible. I mean, she is so knowledgeable when it comes to lumber and when it comes to the housing industry and supply chain. It is just incredible. And the second interview was really good because she talks a lot about the cross-laminated timber industry, which is something that I have been following for quite a few years now, and I think is going to be the next big move in building. Like, there really hasn't been a big trend change in the building industry. Like, they pretty much build buildings the same way. There's other little changes that happen to it, little innovations and stuff, but there is no big trend change that has ever happened really in the building industry for like 30, 40 years. Cross-laminated timber industry, building high rises and apartment complexes completely out of wood, that is going to be a game changer when it comes to the building industry. It's something that is very different from anything that we have ever had. It's going to be sold as a green product, not that I really care about that part of it, but it is definitely going to be pushed as that. So there's going to be a lot of investment going into that cross-laminated timber industry. And when you hear, and like, I didn't have any talking with Keta at all from Madison Lumber. I didn't have any talking with her about the cross-laminated timber industry. I dropped that question on her for the first time just to see what her response was from it, and I was blown away by it. So if you have a chance to watch the second interview, from that or yeah from that interview that I had done, it is really good. She talks a lot about that industry, and it's a really good report. So anyhow, let's move on. I got another super chat. Let's go see what they have to say. Jahaz, thank you so much for the $4.99. Thoughts on prefabricated sheds? Will those drop in price 6 months to a year from now when Fed rates really hit the market? I'm thinking in 6 months from now, even like, so right now, we are really going to start feeling the effects of the Federal Reserves and the lifting of interest rates. Because you think about it, what did they started doing this about 6 months ago, right? So it takes 6 months to a year before we really feel the effects. So it's going to start now creeping into the economy in a way that people are really going to start feeling the pain from it. And 6 months from now, it's going to be full on, the first initial lifting of interest rates. And then you got to think for the next year after that, it's going to be even more painful, as the continuation of lifting of interest rates that is happening now is going to really be impacting the economy. This is one of the reasons why I said there's going to be issues come the middle of 2023, and that the Federal Reserve is going to be pushing out a central bank digital currency at that time, because that's really where the pain is going to be felt from the lifting of interest rates that is happening right now, right? Because it's going to take a year. Anyhow, so sheds. I would assume so, yeah. Like, I mean, as long as sheds keep going into production, that's what's going to do it, right? I mean, if there's no sheds in production, then there's no prefabricated sheds to buy at a cheaper price. But if they continue to fabricate sheds, like they feel that there's going to be a demand for them, but people don't buy them, then yeah, the prices would come down. You also have to think, like, what is it that people buy with credit? Like cars, houses, mattresses. I mean, things like that. Things that people really just don't save the cash up to buy, and instead they use like credit cards or something else. When you have a buying capabilities of credit, then it doesn't really matter what the price tag is. It matters more of what the monthly payment is. And so when it comes to items that you purchase with credit, that price really fluctuates off the interest rates. But when it comes to things like food and fuel, I mean, there is a lot of people who are living off credit cards. But when it comes to like food and fuel, that's usually cash that you earned, that you have to spend on that stuff. And that's where like discretionary spending and stuff like that happens. So I would imagine that if the sheds are continued into production, then yeah, you'd see the prices come down. But that's going to be questionable because I don't know, like, how much demand for sheds are taking place. The future is sex, drugs, and rock and roll. In the past. Don't forget about the past. 522 of you up in here, 229 likes. I'm a cash guy, so I am hoping to see the discounts hit the hit the things I want for starting my hobby farm. That's a great idea, and I don't think I think that's actually going to be a really good idea if you could, especially if you live somewhere where there's liquidation warehouses. Like if you live near a city or something like that, where they can have like concentration of overstocked goods that they can sell for a cheaper price. That's the kind of place that you'd really want to go to try and get like the really good deals on it. But still, I just find that just the supply of goods coming in, what I have a feeling is going to happen is that the new supply chain, once it starts to be reestablished, you're going to find goods coming from different parts of the world that are cheaper, that are not the same ones that you remember buying. Like I'm already starting to experience it with nails. Like I said, we used to get all our nails from one particular vendor, all made in China. Now we're starting to get nails from like India. And that's kind of interesting to think about because I've never seen nails come from that particular region of the world. It's always been, China or the United States or something like that. Anyway. Thank you very much. What is that? Taco Cruiser? $5 super chat. Thank you very much. What are your thoughts about I don't know. You keep asking me. Is this you who keeps asking me about Peter Zion's? Am I saying that right? Predictions of the collapse of globalization and demographic collapse. Yeah, it certainly seems to be taking place, but to be honest, I don't know anything about his opinion, and so therefore I can't really answer the question. But I thank you very much for the $5 super chat. If you have another question, I'll try and answer that. How far you think lumber falling? I do not think that lumber will go much below 500 per thousand. Like it could dip down into 400, 450, but that low of a price is not something that the mills are willing to participate in. They are stuck at a much higher per thousand price, and this is something that you should go and check out the videos because Keta goes over this really well, because she talks very much like she goes, you're looking at the wrong price, you're looking at the futures. I'm talking cash, and that's what Keta is saying. Like when she's talking cash market, the price that you pay at the mill today. When you look at like the CNBC like futures price of lumber, that's a price that could be two months out. So as far as like what you are paying cash and what that future price is, those are two different prices, and they're not always like really close. Sometimes they're way off, where you're paying a lot more in cash than you are out there in the future. But when it comes to lumber prices, they're not going to fall much below 500 per thousand. At 500 per thousand, that's where the mills can still make a profit or still earn a decent amount. When it starts dropping below that, they're not interested in that. They cannot like continue to operate with the input costs that exist today at 500 per thousand. Now there was a time they could, and she actually explains this. This is really good stuff. Like I said, you should watch it. She explains it that there was a time when they would just produce right through like a downturn in the markets. Like if the prices drop, they were like, that's good, it's eventually going to turn around, and they just keep producing, and then eventually all the lumber would sell. But now they're much more reactive to it. Like if the price drops below 500 per thousand, they curtail right now. They're like, nope, we're not going to do it. And they'll stop producing until the inventory tightens up and the prices go back up. And they do this on a regular basis. This is the oversupply, undersupply, oversupply that we have talked about. The new price is going to be somewhere between 600 and 800 per thousand. Does it mean that it'll drop below 600 per thousand at times like we're in right now? Sure. And will it go over 800 per thousand? Yeah. But we're not going to go down and stay at 400 per thousand for any length of time that it makes a significant impact on the lumber market. And the same thing with the highs of 1,000 per thousand. That's not going to take place either for any significant amount of time to cause an increase in the lumber prices to the point that it's like a huge impact on the economy. It's going to be between 600 and 800 per thousand. That's going to be the new average. And how long it takes to find equilibrium, who knows? It could take years, for that to take place. Wood per thousand going below 300 as things going to get bad. I mean, okay, I'm not saying it won't, right? Because it very well could. I mean, it could drop to 300 per thousand as people are like, just no longer interested in buying a single stick of lumber. But at that point, lumber mills will shut down, period. Right? The inventory will eventually find its way through the system, and the prices will go back up. I mean, it could hit 300 per thousand. I'm not saying it won't, but I doubt it. There is still construction. There is still a lot of it taking place. I see people every day coming into the lumberyard that I'm working at. I'm not saying that it is like extreme or like anything to be like significant, but it is better than it has been recently. So like the lumber price is coming down, it's starting to get people into those projects again. There's going to be project delaying fatigue. I mean, eventually it gets to a point where people are just like, man, I'm not postponing this project any longer. I want the deck, I want to enjoy it, and I'm going to buy it. And that's what happens. Well, I got to roll this down. The sun's coming out. So. Yep. Okay, moving on. 40 minutes into this, we got 500 of you up in the chat. Thank you very much for being here. Be sure and hit the like button. All right. Oops, whoa, see, my phone almost fell there. Okay. Mainly discussing the value proposition of reasonable, well-off Western with options. Is their net worth and property protected, and are the better dating on social opportunities abroad? I don't know what that, you must be talking with somebody else. Okay. The bottom in the housing market is dropping out. Inflation will be dropping like a rock because so much in our economy depends on housing markets. Fuel is also stabilizing too. Okay. So that's something interesting to think about. Like, how far down can the housing market go? Like, how, like, this is something that the Federal Reserve, or the idea that the Federal Reserve and the unwinding of the balance sheet is going to impact the housing market dramatically. As they start to unwind this balance sheet, causing the mortgage-backed securities to flood the market, cause the price of those to go down, and the interest rates on them to go up, the yield to go up, right? So just like any other bond out there, if the price goes down, the yields go up. And just like supply and demand, if you have a supply of mortgage-backed securities out there for investors to buy and the supply starts to increase because the Fed is unwinding their balance sheet, then the price will go down. So this is kind of like the whole idea. I don't know if you all got that, but that's pretty much the concept behind the Federal Reserve and the unwinding of the balance sheet, causing the interest rates on mortgages to go up, because there's this flood of mortgage-backed securities now coming into the market for investors to buy. And since there's a flood of them, or more supply of mortgages or mortgage-backed securities, and the investors, who are the ones who are the demand side of it, they don't have that much demand, and therefore the price of those mortgage-backed securities falls. Okay, so if we got that clear, the Federal Reserve had dropped interest rates dramatically during the pandemic and buying mortgage-backed securities in an extreme amount. So when you have this buyer of mortgage-backed securities and you have a definite buyer who's like stating it, we are buying this amount, then you have other investors out there who are going to try and front run that idea. Since they know there's going to be a buyer of mortgage-backed securities, that encourages them to go out there and buy mortgage-backed securities as well, since they can sell those things to the Federal Reserve for a profit coming into the future. So when you have the Federal Reserve stating it straight up, we are buying mortgage-backed securities, well, then that brings in a lot of liquidity into the market. And the interest rates begin to fall as the price of these bonds continue to go up, as there's more and more buyers coming into it. Now, when you have the interest rates falling, that also gives the people out there who hold mortgages, especially high interest rate mortgages, gets them to be able to roll those mortgages over into new, cheaper mortgages or less interest rates. And when they do that, that creates another mortgage out there to create another mortgage-backed security. So as these mortgages are being refinanced, they are creating ever-increasing amounts of mortgage-backed securities for all these investors, including the Federal Reserve, to buy. But if it goes the other way, if the interest rates begin to rise, then there's less refinancing taking place. And if the interest rates begin to rise, then you have a slowdown in the new home sales, or not just new home sales, but in home sales in general, then that is even less mortgages being written. So if you have less mortgages being written because of refinancing, and you have less mortgages being written because of home sales, lack of home sales, I guess I should say, then there's less mortgage-backed securities on the market, the supply of them, for the investors to buy, the demand, right? So the demand versus supply, now the supply is shrinking, the demand is still somewhat there, because as the interest rates rise, that actually increases the demand for these things, as the investors are going, well, geez, that like this higher yield, mortgages, generally most people make their payments. There was those toxic mortgages back in the day, but these aren't necessarily toxic mortgages now. So the investors start to step in. Like, how is that balance now to take place? Can the Federal Reserve begin to add mortgages to this market, to the mortgage-backed securities, to this market, obviously starting to increase the supply. If the demand is there, as the interest rates begin to rise, they may be able to sell it into that demand without getting the interest rates to rise too much. And this is a way that they could unload their balance sheet, especially if there's less refinancing and less home sales taking place out there in the market. You see where I'm kind of getting at? And then if the house prices begin to fall too much, like all of a sudden people are like, oh man, look at all these house prices. They've gone from extremely like overvalued to like going to normal and then start going under normal. Well, the Federal Reserve could just back away from their unwinding of their balance sheet and like not even like say that I mean, they have to probably make a statement about it, but they wouldn't have to do too much dramatic change to their monetary policy other than to say like, okay, well, we're not going to sell mortgages into the market this month. We're going to let whatever unwind, but we're just not going to sell any. And that perception right there alone would change what the markets feel about things. All right. Moving on. Oops. Shoot. I didn't mean to do that. Okay, here we go. Should one be holding USD or their own currency as a reserve investment capital for the impending deflation? I mean, I think holding cash or holding something that is very close to cash, meaning like, holding a very short-term treasury or something like that, something where you can get your return on your capital right away, where you don't have to wait too long. I think that's the position to be in. I think that's the position to be in. I mean, until the Federal Reserve actually changes their stance, I think that's the way it's going to be. And I would continue to take on that kind of approach. I mean, this is me personally. Like I said, I don't give investment advice, but this is where I'm kind of headed towards my thoughts. I would continue with that until I see the 5-year, 30-year start to, the spread on that start to widen. Once the spread on that starts to widen, then I would start moving back into, what I feel are going to be good, viable companies out there that are going to make it into the future. I like, again, I'm not really big into the whole idea of the green stuff, whatever is going on out there, that political push. But things like that cross-laminated timber industry, I think that's going to be a huge industry. And I don't know, I'm going to figure out a way to maybe invest into something like that. And that's my just personal thoughts on it. That's not investment advice. The housing market is going to take a hit. It may or may not. I mean, if here's something that I have kind of found is that if everybody is saying it's going to happen, then it probably won't, right? I mean, it's just like everybody said that everybody was going to die from the pandemic. Like, not everybody on here, but like, I mean, everybody around me was all freaked out about this damn pandemic. And then even today, like, I mean, I'm talking to a guy who's just like, yeah, I got COVID. I can't believe it. I was all vaccinated up and boosted and boosted again and like, took all the precautions and everything. And I'm like, no, because the vaccinations didn't work. Everybody got sick, right? Every single person I know got sick. I mean, there's very few people I know who didn't. Not time to buy anything yet. Let's see here. No. Yes, the Great Reset agenda will not allow real estate to drop that much. They don't want normies owning property. Yeah, that's another way to look at it. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but I mean, I could see where that would definitely fall into the, conspiracy theory coming out of like the New World Order thought. Yeah. Awesome. Curious, do you think it's better to take an MD angle, the real estate investment angle, or the traveler angle? Traveler. Yep, definitely. All right. We're already have had 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. Yep. Yeah, we have. I mean, it's obvious we're going into recession. The only difference is that, I mean, what are the two like worst parts about a recession, right? One, everybody loses their job and massive defaults, right? Or layoffs or bankruptcy, stuff like that. And so this is really where the problem comes in with when it comes to a recession, is that people end up losing their jobs and losing, going bankrupt and stuff. But we may not see that going into this particular recession, as we have like this bailout, that like this pre-bailout that took place during the pandemic. And that's really where I think things are, like, they're going to unwind that pre-pandemic bailout until it gets to the point where they can reestablish like new green shoots, right? That's what they'll call it. Like burning out all the undergrowth. Interest rates will stay high, killing off these zombie corporations until the viable companies are the only thing that's left. Then they'll drop interest rates and people can start taking out loans again to start expanding the economy and moving on from there. How long that takes, I don't know. But oh man, phone's gonna fall over. All right. Do you think the student loan forgiveness will add to inflation? No. Wouldn't that actually be deflationary in a sense? Um, because like when you, I mean, if you, I guess it depends on which way you end up looking at it, because if you take the student loan debt and you just dissolve it, it just goes away, which it doesn't happen like that. But if it just goes away, then that is the destruction of money and credit taking place right there. Um, if it's a taxpayer bailout, then you're just bailing it out into the future of it. And so if that is inflationary, only if it is to the point that the return on capital investment is more than what is invested into it to begin with. So it would take a low interest rate world like it has right now to actually cause it to be a deflationary in action, as the return on capital investment would be less going into the future if you were to have refinanced that student loan debt now with taxpayer money. Does that kind of make sense? I don't know if I said all that right. So basically, if you have a high interest rate loan right now on these student loans and you pay it off, but it's paid off with taxpayer bailout from low interest rate taxpayer funding, then that taxpayer funding would end up being deflationary going into the future, as the return on capital investment from that would be negative. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's increasing the money supply, so yes, will accelerate inflation. But is it, okay, that's the thing. Is it really increasing the money supply? If you have a, like, if you take that money and if you take that money and you get back less in purchasing power at the end of the money that is there, right? So the reinvestment of that going back into the economy begins to come less, right? So if that's the case, then that is a deflationary cycle that is happening. It might be inflationary on prices, but it's deflationary in the expansion of like the credit cycle and credit and money. So it's low interest rates are inherently deflationary. It's hard to get that, but it's not in like in the immediate as it takes place. It's the cycle that it takes in the end that ends up causing the money to be less, and less money velocity and less availability out there and less credit. That is deflationary in nature. And that's what takes place in a low neutral interest rate world, or a low interest rate world, not necessarily a low neutral interest rate, just the low interest rate world. Once you have higher interest rates, I mean, you think about it, like it's the easiest way to understand it is like I've talked about it being back in the early 80s when you had 10 years at 15% on the 10-year treasury. You could loan the government $1 million, get $150,000 a year return on the investment going to the government. This is a safe return. Now, $150,000 a year is quite a bit of money you get to spend into the economy. Well, nowadays the interest rates are so low, you get like, well, the 10 years, what, like around 3%. So you get like $30,000 a year for $1 million investment. That is not a really great return, especially nowadays. $30,000 is hardly enough to live off of. So it's like that is a deflationary thing taking place, as the low interest rates are causing a return on capital investment to go less and less and less. How is it deflationary when the money has already been spent and tuition is now, they are introducing more into the system? So I'm gonna move on. Okay, let's see here. Student debt forgiveness is a drop in the bucket. AMC Ape is only hope. 2020 was life or death. Most chose death. Huh. Most chose death. They'll do what they can. They keep this charade up. Well, to me, like, even like the idea of paying off or relieving student debt is more of like a dangling of the carrot to make sure that more students take on the debt. Because if they're looking right now going, holy moly, man, our like parents and our older brothers and everybody else, like the previous generation just got nailed by the student debt. They're all just working regular old jobs anyway, but they got these degrees that they don't seem to use. Why in the world would I go and do that? And then they go and relieve a bunch of debt. They're like, let's go do it anyway, right? Oh, that makes sense. I mean, if they're going to pay for it, then I'll go do it, right? So it's more of like a dangling of the carrot, in my opinion. Increase the discretionary spending will be inflationary. Yeah, but if you have a decrease in discretionary spending due to the fact that you have less jobs out there, due to the fact that you have increased the rates and zombie corporations no longer can exist and start laying people off, then you'll have like a downturn in consumers. Current and future students will now have increased college tuition. I don't know. Isn't that just creating a bubble though? Doesn't matter if there is fuel shortage, if there is a shortage of the ways to get it to you. Well, yeah, and if there's a shortage of the way to get it to you, then that's going to increase the availability or the price that it costs to get to you. That increases the availability of it because people are going to want to take advantage of those increased prices. That's something that we have experienced here over the last, whatever year. As the supply chain broke down, a lot of trucking companies tried to expand. They tried to expand by buying trucks and equipment and hire drivers and stuff. And now they're facing the consequences from that over expansion. Now there's not as much need for them. And I just did a video on that. There's articles talking about that very thing, where companies are laying off employees, they're shutting down altogether, rates are falling. It's because there was this, and you're going to find the same thing. It's because of the demand, right? This huge demand increases, price goes way up. People are like, okay, I got to fill in this demand. And so they start increasing their production of whatever it is, or their service, like trucking. Well, the same thing's going to happen like in farming. Once the food prices start to fall, like people are going to get hit really hard with this food price increase. And it's not so much here in the United States. We produce a lot of food around here. I mean, especially here. It's the rest of the world. We export a lot of food out of this country, and the rest of the world is not producing like they once did. They are having issues with, their own supply chains, especially stuff like coming from, the Ukraine war. So when you have that kind of situation taking place, then you have a demand for food that starts to increase on a global scale, and that increases the food price here within the United States. And that's one of the reasons why we're going to see a shortage of food. And it's not so much the shortage of food and the availability of it, is the price. And it's not the price like here, it's the price outside of here that's driving the prices up here in the United States. Okay, once the prices start to move up, the farmers are going to be like, oh yeah, it's time, right? So they're going to start taking advantage of these high prices by getting into more production. They're going to plant more, grow more, do whatever it is that they got to expand this production to take advantage of these higher prices. And then all of a sudden, what do you have? You have a flood of stuff that starts to come in because all these farmers overexpanded, and then the prices start to fall. Now, I know all that is really difficult to see, especially when you have like the current situations that are taking place where people are like, man, that is not even what's going on. It's time. Like it takes like years and years for this to all work through, but it's just the way it goes down. You can read history books on this. It's just the way it's just the way it goes. And so it's just a matter of time before you see the shifts in these things, because as capital investment starts finding its way into the most like profitable areas, and if food happens to be profitable, then you're going to find a lot of investment going into it. It's what ended up damaging so many farmers back during the Depression, is that there was this huge expansion into farming after, from all the war efforts and stuff. All this food went over to the war efforts, and these farmers here in the United States were just like killing it. They were just doing awesome. So they overexpanded, and then it was over, and then they couldn't pay their debts, and then they came in and like bankrupt all these farms. Paid farmers to like burn crops and stuff like that to keep the food prices from falling because there was so much of it. And this is during a time of like Depression era stuff. It's really weird to think about, you know. Have you ever thought about applying to be a Federal Reserve chairman? No, I don't have a degree. I don't have any like I don't have any position that I can say that gave me the ability to even sit there at the FOMC and talk. Besides, I mean, Jerome Powell, like the chairman of the Federal Reserve, he's just, I guess, I don't know. I guess I could be an actor. I'm a pretty good actor. I could, you know, just be the voice for the Federal Reserve, be the, you know. But as far as the decision maker and stuff like that, like I have no idea what it is that the Federal Reserve is supposed to do to try and make things good and right for people. Like I don't know if that's even like something that they can do. Like I don't think that's like even in the realms of their possibilities. I think it's better to understand what the Federal Reserve is and how to navigate your own life in a position to take the best advantage of the current economic environment. Because there's business cycles that, regardless of the Federal Reserve, like everybody wants to point at the Fed and say they're the economy right there. They are not. They're just the currency maker, the provider. The economy is the people and the decisions that they make. The economy is quite organic. And you know, understanding that part of things is probably the key to making sure that you make the best decisions in your life, is to know that it's not like anybody, any government, any bank or anything like that that's doing this. It's us as a whole doing it together, stepping forward through this. I mean, whether you realize it or not, that's what is happening, right? Because every one of us makes the decision to buy a new car, TV, or house. Now, whether you decide to stay in your 99 Toyota Corolla or go get the $67,000 Camaro, that's everybody's decision to make. You'll probably see me in the 99 Toyota Corolla for a while, but you know, we can always dream. And so that's the decisions that everybody makes to that gears the economy, right? So if everybody had this dream of building or buying the $67,000 Camaro and everybody actually pursued that dream, then you would have a pretty hot economy, as the commissions that are being made from those sales and the amount of money flowing through the system would be quite high. But if you're sitting in your 99 Toyota Corolla and you're not intending on buying another one, then there's probably not going to be a whole lot of motion taking place in the economy because of that. And it's all based on the decisions that we are making as an individual. Let's see. So glad I made minimum student loan payments. Yeah. Needs and wants. People don't know the difference. That is so true. Like, I mean, been trying to figure that one out myself. The whole needs and wants. Like, I mean, sometimes I look at things and it was just like, do you really need this, or is it something you want? And, you know, a lot of times it could be something that you want, but maybe it is something that you need. Like, maybe it is something in your life that you need that is going to make you feel better about yourself, or feel better just in general, like say wearing new trendy clothes or something like that. Like I've always had a hard time buying good clothes that fit, that, you know, I just always just wore whatever, just baggy hoodies and stuff like that. That's always been kind of my thing. But then I realized, you know, I feel a lot better, just feel better when you dress in nicer clothing. Right? So I thought, man, I should get clothing that is nicer, because it feels good to wear nice clothes. It feels good to have a haircut, right? So it feels good to have these things that you don't necessarily need, but that you want, right? But those are needs, because you need to feel good. You need to feel good about who you are and the things that you're doing in your life, right? So sometimes what you want is things that you need, but you really do need to figure out the difference between them. I mean, do you really need the fancy $67,000 Camaro? No, but it feels good, right? So maybe we can just dream about that and drive our 99, right? And because you don't really need it, and that want is just all it really is a want. But sometimes feeling good about yourself and the needs that go with it, taking vacations, right? Getting a massage or something like that. I mean, things that, I mean, I guess a massage could be more of a health issue too, but anyway, you guys get my point. How important or big are student loans for the U.S. government cash flow? Probably not real good for their cash flow. Like, cause like students don't pay their debts, right? I mean, I don't know. Like, I can't imagine that being. I wish I knew the answer to that question, but I cannot imagine that being like a really good cash flow asset. But considering that they can't escape it, then it's like a guaranteed cash flow, right? I'm 51 years old. I've never seen a U.S. politician I thought was decent or either side of the aisle. Well, I agree with either side of the aisle thing, but there's been some politicians out there that I thought, did okay. Like I was kind of cool with them in some of the things that they have talked about. Ron Paul was definitely one of them. I was cool with Ron Paul. Um, I'm not like terribly fond of Trey Gowdy, but a lot of the stuff, like a lot of the things that I've heard him speak on, I had to agree with. So like guys like Trey Gowdy, I think are good. Like I would think he would have been an awesome FBI director. I wish he had gone for that position. I think he would have taken that position very seriously because that's what I think he does when he's in position is that he does take things seriously. Whether I agree with it or not doesn't really matter as long as it's like not screwing around trying to appease other people out there or something like that, but really taking the position to what you feel is the appropriate actions. I think that's Trey Gowdy. Um, anyway, I'm not into politics, so I'm not going to get into it anymore. Dude has amazing hair sense. Hmm. Let's see here. Massages with happy endings are the best I hear. I guess. I don't know. I really don't know. Oh man, are you getting paid by government front? Mercy, dude. No. Why would I be getting paid? It's one thing to it's one thing to disagree on how much you disagree with what the Fed's actions are. It's another thing to not necessarily agree, but to understand what the Fed is doing and then to try and be predictive of that. It's not up to me to try and fight the Federal Reserve. Like, if you want to fight the Fed, buy gold. Just sit in gold only. Right? That's it. Like, if you took your cash, like took your bank, your paycheck, went right down, cashed it, went down to the coin shop, bought gold. That's it. Gold and silver, and that's the only thing you ever hold. That would be fighting the Federal Reserve, right? You held all that like that. Now, try and live life like that. It is very difficult, right? So if you want to like have inconvenience in your life, then you fight the Fed. You fight them like that way. And that's fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with anybody wanting to do that. In fact, I had that kind of mindset for quite a while, but I'm not into it anymore. But as far as like being part of the idea of the Federal Reserve and what they're doing as far as being appropriate, no. I mean, I'm not. I'm not. I'm agnostic towards it, right? I don't care if it's appropriate or inappropriate. It's not up to me to decide that. It's up to me to decide what it is that they are doing or what I feel that they are doing, and then what it is that I can do about that, for myself. And you should do that too. I find it difficult to call the Pauls politicians. They don't deserve to be called dirty words. Yeah, I agree. And I've listened to a bit of Rand Paul's stuff, but not nearly as much as Ron Paul's. And like I said, after they blackballed the Republican Party blackballed Ron Paul out of the party, I was like, you know what, I'm done. I'm like, never mind. I'm not cool with Republicans or Democrats or politics or anything else out there, and I just turned it all off. And that's really like I had gone into originally I had gone into like banking, what was going on, and then I fell into like conspiracy theories and like New World Order stuff, and then I fell into like politics and started studying politics really heavy, and then I realized that it was all such a orchestrated, manipulative game that people just don't seem to want to understand, and that's the real way that they get away with things. I just gave up on all of it because it made my stomach hurt so damn bad. And then when I got back into it, I said, just follow the money. That's it. Don't care about anything else. Don't follow the politics. Don't follow any of that stuff. Just follow what it is going on at the Federal Reserve and their monetary policies and try to make the best decision you can for yourself. And that's what I do now because politics are a joke. Like, it's an absolute joke. I don't know how much time and just thought that I had dedicated like the hours upon hours of like trying to figure out what it is that politics should be and the way they should really behave. What a waste of time. I mean, complete waste of time. If you really want to know what's going on, follow the money, make the best decisions for yourself, try to learn to start businesses or try to figure out best investments, way to generate cash flow, stuff like that. I mean, there are so many ways to make money in this world nowadays. I don't know why people don't take more advantages of it. I mean, I see everybody out there doing different little side gigs and ways of like earning cash. It just blows me away. All right, politicians are why we are on lockdown, why we were on lockdown. Yeah, and that's again like outside of like people volunteering the lockdown, like I understand like, explain Taco Bell politics. Okay, I'll explain Taco Bell politics. But outside of like this businesses that shut down and the forced wearing of masks, like you can't come in my store unless you put a mask on. I I didn't I didn't I didn't suffer anything from like the consequences of it other than the inconveniences of it. But like people talked about how damaging it was. It wasn't damaging to me personally. And that's what like kind of sucks about it is that so many other people got hurt by it. But I guess that if you just decided that you weren't going to be part of the game, like I mean, I wasn't doing business, right? So therefore I didn't have to worry about business shutting me down. I didn't have to worry about losing my job because I had an essential job. Like to me, nothing changed in my life. Like everything went the same except for the inconveniences towards it. Okay, anyway, let me explain Taco Bell politics since that was a question, and I really do like the Taco Bell politics analogy. Taco Bell politics analogy. There we go. So when it comes to politics, and what I have found is that no matter what you look at, like no matter what it is, it's all the same. Whether it's, coming down to like the universal health care that we've had, like the Obama administration and the pushing of Obamacare, right? The Republicans at the time hated the idea. They talked about how it was going to absolutely destroy the nation and that everybody was going to suffer because of it. And now, granted, there is a lot of political back and forth pull that you can talk about, but it doesn't matter if you look at the end result of it is that it did pass, and now there is absolutely zero talk about repealing it altogether. See, there's talk about repealing and replacing it, but then the Republicans went from we don't like this, we don't want it to okay, we like it now and we want to mess with it. We want it part of our own game. So in the beginning, this talk about politics forced the idea of having a universal health care. And once they had it, now everybody gets to play around with it. So it doesn't matter really what the topic is or what is going on. It's part of a two-party system that they are going to feed into you. And it's much like going into Taco Bell. So when you go into Taco Bell, it doesn't matter what you're ordering. You can go look at the menu. It's going to be the same ingredients. You get the same chicken, the same beef, you get the same cheese. It doesn't matter what it is. It just matters what kind of wrapper that you get. Do you want it in the shape of a taco? Do you want it soft or crunchy? How about a burrito? Spicy or not? With or without cream cheese? The only thing is, how is it going to be shaped? But the filling on the inside is the same. It doesn't matter what it is. You get the exact same ingredients. The only difference is the way it's shaped and the way it's presented to you. There is no other option. It's just that. So that's Taco Bell politics. Whether it's, Republican or Democratic, it doesn't matter what it is. It's part of this two-party left-right paradigm that you will suffer with the only ingredients that they are providing for you. Never once ever looking outside of that possibility of bringing in, like, say, a libertarian thought, which would be something outside of Taco Bell politics, right? All right, thank you very much, Emerson, for the $10. What happened to Meet Bingo Sundays? Love your vids. Keep on keeping on. Yeah, it was a bummer. I'm going to try and get those things back up and running again. There was, I think, a little bit of like, I wouldn't say it was like an issue that came up, but there was a concern that was elevated about the consumption of alcohol and people's behavior on the video being live, and that may not be the most appropriate actions taking place at the time. So anyway, I took them down just so that I wouldn't create any more of a rising of an issue, so that that everything would just be remain cool. But I haven't had the ability. Gee whiz, I cannot talk. I have not had the ability to say get it back up and running again in a way that I feel is going to be that appropriateness that everybody would feel comfortable with. Did I say all that right? God, I don't know. But that's what happened, is that somebody got mad, right? I don't know. Nobody got mad. Nobody got mad at all. It's just something that, I didn't know if it was going to create an issue or not, so I had to stop. Where is this deflation you once said was happening? Go buy a TV, man. TVs have gotten cheap. You know? And think about it, it's the expansion of money and credit. What's happening right now with the Federal Reserve? They're going to start inflicting pain. That's deflation. It's coming, right? It's going to start off with disinflation, right? Where the inflation stops going up at the rate that it once did. And then you're going to find that the dollar is going to start causing pain around the world like you wouldn't believe. And they're going to be desperate for dollars. And the only way they can get dollars is by selling their stuff off. And the best place to sell their stuff off to get dollars is the United States. And that's where you're going to find where there's going to be a lot of deflationary scenarios coming in. Especially if, like, it's not going to happen in food and fuel, right? That's where it's not going to happen. Look everywhere else. I mean, already you're starting to see like prices in real estate cap out. Like they're no longer going up. Like you're not getting reports of increase in real estate. What you're seeing is a decrease in the real estate prices. And so that is like a deflationary scenario. If you have less mortgages being issued, that's less debt and currency being issued. That's all deflationary. Now, if you're just looking for the prices to come down, that's the symptoms of it. You got to wait for the deflation to actually occur in a dramatic fashion to cause the prices to come down. But you're already seeing it happen in oversupplied stuff. I mean, just type in oversupplied inventory and hit the news feed on your Google. There's article after article about it. I mean, you don't have to look very hard to find it, It's just not happening in the things you truly want to see it in, like, like a house, like, in the cars and stuff that are still in short supply and probably will continue to be for some time. I mean, I'm still amazed that this whole chip shortage is still taking place, considering that they have backed off on all the car production out there. Where did all these cars with like missing chips, did they eventually get into production or into the supply chain? Did they eventually make it out there? I mean, I haven't heard a whole lot about that stuff, but it seems to me that they are like dropping production dramatically on all these vehicles. And it doesn't surprise me when you think about the EV movement, especially when you have laws being passed like in California and I think going to be here, Washington, and eventually here in Oregon. It seems like it's going to be happening where all the vehicles after 2030 or something, in the next 13 years, have to be electric vehicles. Like that's the only ones that will be sold. That's an incredible thought. Like, holy moly, in 13 years, like all brand new vehicles are going to be electric vehicles, and that's it. So what happens to all the gas running vehicles out there? Lesser gas stations? Well, why would there be lesser gas stations? Because the profit in the gas is not so much there, and the prices are coming down because there's less people driving cars. I mean, that's going to be a deflationary thing happening. Now, whether it occurs like that, we don't know. We got to find out, but that's what I kind of suspect. And I don't know. Anyway, it's going to be a very changing times, that's for sure. All right. What the hell can't people just grow up? All right. Central banks will fail to control inflation without better fiscal policy. So do you think like the government is creating the inflation kind of idea? Like, I mean, in my opinion, like the Federal Reserve can really control the inflation by knocking the feet out from the jobs market. Like if they cause everybody to go in unemployment, then you will see people working for a hell of a lot less money. Like once people start going hungry, they'll work. Like it's a guarantee. Like they will take under the table jobs, they will take lesser paying jobs, they will go to work. But you also have to stop feeding them, right? Which means that food needs to get quite expensive. So even if you are getting your EBT, it just doesn't buy enough, and you need to supplement that with an actual job. So if you start hacking the jobs out from underneath or hacking the legs out from underneath the jobs market, and you cause those people to go off and take whatever job they can, you'll stop seeing the pay on labor go up, and that'll stop the inflation. Like it will slow the inflation down dramatically, and if not, cause it to go the other way, as people will not be earning enough to actually spend it into the economy. Either you work or you rob when your time gets tough. Yeah, I totally believe that, Bitcoin. I mean, when a man loses it all and has nothing left to lose, they lose it, right? They go out there and they'll steal and rob and do whatever. And if you're really hungry, you'll kill. You know, and that's scary to think about. Fiat is tied to banks like crypto is tied to speculators. All right. Do you have cost push inflation or demand pull inflation or both? Do we have? Um, I think I think the initial inflation that we had experienced was a demand pull that we had seen coming from like the lockdowns and then people like buying stuff. But then the cost push is really what's going into the idea now, as labor costs and fuel costs and stuff like that are going into it. So I mean, I guess in the initial beginnings, that's what was causing the inflation to go up, was the demand pull, and now it would be the cost push, the continuation of it. um, Both of those are coming to an end, right? I mean, as you're going to start seeing like fuel prices coming down, which they're already starting to, and labor costs will start to come down as well, as layoffs start to find themselves more prevalent going into the bankruptcies, the zombie corporations that will eventually start taking place on a more prevalent scale. Right on. 579 of you up in here. Be sure and hit that like button when you come in. All right, we are in a recession heading to an inflationary depression. I don't know. Hordes will be seen as the problem of everything and will be told to give up their stuff. Stockpile food for what? It can all end in a matter of seconds. Well, yeah, okay. That's true. And I mean, the idea of stockpiling food, like, I am not one to, like, I mean, it is good to have a good stockpile of food. Hey, right on. Thank you, Lumberjack Landlord, for the $20. Hold on one second. I'll get to your question. It is not, I mean, it's not for me to stockpile, like, 10 years worth of food. Like, to me, that is like an insane amount of food. But having a decent supply of food. So like if for some reason you can't get to town for the next couple of weeks to be able to survive, that's not a bad position to be in. And then to me, the more important part is being able to preserve food. Like that to me is the absolute critical key to being able to survive going into long time food shortages. Because you're going to find times where it's not so much like it's the continuous supply of food that you're going to have issues with, right? So all of a sudden you'll have like a bunch of food come in, like, oh hey, we have access to like a ton of something. Like, I'm just going to use for example carrots, right? This farmer who grew an abundance of carrots, and now there's just a ton of them right here available to you, but you can only eat so many carrots before they rot, right? Before they go bad, and then you have to preserve them. So being able to preserve those carrots for any time going into the future, so by canning those, that's really where the skill to survival is going to be, is being able to have the supplies and the skills to can that food and preserve that food for a length of time going into the future. That's really where like food supplies are going to be critical for you. Trying to stock up now and preserve food for like the next 10 years and survive just off of that. I mean, what if you have to pack up and bail, right? I mean, you can only grab like, you know, a few cases of lids and jars and rings and canning supplies, but you're not going to have to worry about packing 10 years worth of food with you if you have to bail out of there, right? You can just take your handful of jars and go, and be able to use those and recycle them on a regular basis if you come across that, the food that you need, or the food that you can come across that you scavenge or trade for or whatever. But that's going to be like, to me, that's more important, being able to preserve food and having that skill to do it. Thank you so much, Lumberjack Landlord, for the $20. Pure gold as always, sir. You are a patriot. Thanks, bro. I was negotiating my fuel contract with multiple fuel companies for the winter. They wouldn't lock in a price unless I agreed to $8 a gallon. Thoughts? Wow. So they must be pretty nervous. I don't know. I guess my thoughts on that is they must be really nervous about the future and not willing. I mean, would they be willing to, like, buy it back from you at $8 a gallon if you didn't use it? I mean, that's like, I don't know. Like, that seems to me like an extreme amount, and they must be very nervous about the future to try and sell it at $8 a gallon to you today. So they must see, like, a bigger demand and not a big availability of supply. It's the only thoughts I must have on that. Gosh, I don't know. Let me think about that one a little bit. Um, Live anywhere but near a Walmart. Notice they are all near railroad tracks. Future FEMA camps. Let me think. Well, the railroad tracks for us are right here. And there is none anywhere near the Walmart in our county. Like, not even close. I don't know. I don't really buy into conspiracies. Well, it's funny, like, what is it a conspiracy? I mean, like, you can just ignore anything that just seems outlandish and just say, like, okay, I'm not going to fall for that, and I'm not going to believe anything that has to come from that. But then you could realize that if you just kind of let your mind wander with it a little bit and just say, okay, well, let's just entertain the thought and maybe not accept it, you can find little nuggets of information within conspiracy theories that are actually quite beneficial. I mean, I can't necessarily think of one offhand, but, because I try not to think about conspiracy theories. But, when people are talking about, like, particular banking, things that have happened in the past, then particular subjects come up that are like, wow, that's a factual thing that actually happened. And then they use that factual thing to blow something way out of proportion. But you can get information following conspiracy theories. It's just that, you can't necessarily fall for the belief of them. Let's see here. Only trains near train tracks. A stopped clock is right twice. Yeah, a broken clock is right 2 times a day. Yeah, that's true. Daniel, this is not a conspiracy. Look at the changes around you. No, there's nothing like. That's the thing. So many people used to call me a conspiracy theorist, like, because I mean, I understand why. I used to get really, really crazy out there. But, like, with the start of this channel, I use almost exclusively mainstream media articles to state my opinions and to get the information from. Now, I look at a lot of other places, but when I post, like, the links in the description, I'm using their information. And therefore, if somebody says, well, that's conspiracy minded or that's a conspiracy theory, it'd be like, hey, this is the information. It came from this mainstream article thing. So, I mean, it's them saying it, not me, right? I mean, I'm saying it because I have an opinion on the matter, but you know as well as I do, if you go and look in the description, you're going to find the article where I got the information, and you can form your own opinion from it. But that's generally how I try to do it, is use mainstream media articles, even though I'll check out all kinds of stuff. I mean, I don't necessarily, like, just follow any one particular news source or anything like that. Like, I don't go anywhere to find it. I let the information flow to me, And a lot of it actually comes from you guys. I mean, through emails and stuff like that. Is the dive bar with 4 pool tables still open near Safeway? You're talking the Desdemona? The Dirty D? Yeah, it's still open. I don't know if they still have the pool tables in there like that, but yeah, they're still open. Alright. I'm the roofer. I'm a bit confused. OSB and 2x4 prices have radically fluctuated for the last 2 years, yet the price of beer and booze hasn't even budged. Huh. Well, I don't know. I'm not a big beer. Actually, I don't drink beer or booze. For like close to 7 years now. So I really don't have much of an opinion when it comes to the alcohol prices that are out there because I just don't follow it. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe people are getting to cheaper beers and the expensive beer is then now more available. I don't know. They don't report unemployment honestly. It's actually a lot higher than what is stated. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that. The only thing that I can say is that it doesn't really matter what the real is. I mean, it does for your own personal decisions and the things that you're gonna. I mean, definitely follow that information. But when it comes to like trying to predict monetary policy coming from the Federal Reserve, it doesn't matter what the real unemployment is. It matters only what metrics they are using to determine, or the data, that they're using to determine what it is that their monetary policy should be. So if they say that unemployment is low, then that's what you have to go with. Like, we can make decisions knowing that the unemployment is much higher, but when it comes to what we're going to predict coming from the Federal Reserve and their monetary policies, we have to go with what information that they are giving out there and what they are saying is happening. Because regardless of what we think, we are not in control of monetary policy. They are. Just remember, fear sells. Yeah, it does. And, I mean, I could get into, like, trying to scare the hell out of people and tell them how much, debt destroys everybody's lives and how we're going to go into like this massive depression due to the Cantillon effect. And people love it. I mean, they love hearing about it and eat it up. And the videos can be real popular when you talk about crisis and chaos and stuff like that. But I want to talk about it in a way that we can actually really understand and not making like choices made out of fear, because when you make choices out of fear, you're not necessarily making good choices. You're making choices that are like, you know, based in like negative thought. Let's see here. People love it. Yeah, they do. Beer is bound to go up. Cost of ingredients and aluminum has gone up. Yeah. As food gets tight, so will prices of beer. Grains won't be grown. Yeah, I don't know. Do you think we will ever see silver premiums come down to the percentage it was in the past? I mean, I guess it could. I don't see that happening with anything that I see like happening like right now. Like, I wouldn't be surprised to find that it does occur at some point in the future, but really what you have to have is people not in fear of anything out there. Like, they have no fear of inflation, no fear of debt crisis, no fear of any of that stuff, because precious metals is really like a safe haven asset. When people are buying and holding silver, they're trying to get out of like concern and fear of other things that are taking place out there. When that happens, the premiums start to rise, right? So you would have to see like that fear dissipate. And once that fear dissipates and goes away, and people aren't, concerned about what's going to happen with their wealth, and they're not worried about trying to secure it inside of silver, then you'll probably see the premiums come down from that point. Like right now, prices are not realistic. Like, the $18 an ounce is not like a realistic price. That is very undervalued. And just on a historic basis, I mean, think about it. It peaked out at $50 an ounce back in the early 80s, and here it is at $18 an ounce. I mean, can you think of any other asset in the entire world that done something like that? Like, there's nothing. There's nothing out there that even remotely has done something like that. I mean, I guess there is. I just don't know it, but. All right. Buy extra vodka for medicinal purposes. Alcohol is poison, makes my body feel like crap. Alcohol is poison. I mean, don't get me wrong, guys. Like, I talk bad about alcohol a lot, and there was a lot of times in the past where during social events or something like that we were drinking and having a good time. Like, I wouldn't give up those times. Like, that was like, those are good memories. Like, I don't want to give up those memories of things. But the deterioration to my life in general over the course of many years of doing it, especially when it started getting into like depression drinking and stuff like that, there was nothing good that came from it. And if I could have created a situation in my life in which that would never have existed, like to have been able to avoid that, I don't know, like that's kind of like a double-edged sword to think about, because if I didn't go through that experience, I may not be where I am today and be able to enjoy some of the things that I have going on in my life now. But it was tough. Like I didn't there was a time in my life I didn't think I was going to amount to anything. Like, I mean, I was always going to be this broke loser feeling guy, right? That's the way I really felt. Like, I mean, I didn't think of myself as a loser, but I didn't think of myself as anything like, than having like broken down cars and no money and no chance of really doing anything. That's what alcohol did to me. After I got out of it, it took years. Like it took a long time to start getting my shit together. But once you start doing that, then life starts getting a lot better because you're not wasting all your time and effort and energy going into drinking and alcohol and stuff like that. All right. Thank you again, man. Lumberjack Landlord Matthew, you're awesome. Something that is happening quietly, states are doubling their state cash fund buckets to cover what they believe will be 100% increase over what it was last year. There is no credible threat that more supply will be there. There's doubling, something that is happening quietly. States are doubling their state cash fund buckets. So they're loading up on cash. I think a lot of people are loading up on cash, and sorry guys, my phone's falling over there. I think a lot of, not only people like the rich elite, corporations, countries, I think a lot of people are loading up on cash. They're getting ready for this downturn in economic activity that's about ready to happen. And it wouldn't surprise me for states to be loading up on cash as well. And you have to think about it, like they have bonds out there just like everybody else. And if they can't pay their bondholders, they're going to go into default. And there's no better way to make sure that you're going to be able to have some sort of cushion and to be sitting on cash. I mean, there was no easier way to get cash than recently with the low interest rates and the selling of bonds. I mean, it just seems to be the place to be. I mean, I with $1,000 point downturn in the Dow yesterday. I mean, you think about it. Do you really want to be sitting in stocks with this kind of concern? With the Federal Reserve saying that they're like openly stating it, like they say they're not using forward guidance anymore. But read that speech that I leave down in the description. That is nothing but forward guidance, telling people you are going to feel the pain. Heating fuel funds diverting a lot of cash to them. Sorry, not enough characters. Oh, I get it. Okay. So I wish I knew a little bit more about that. Like here up in our area, like the heating fuel, we do have a lot of people who have like diesel furnaces and stuff like that, but it's not the prevalent heating uh, fuel. Like a lot of wood fuel is used, and then natural gas. So I mean, there is that part of things. And then like for me personally, I have a heat pump in the house that is really, actually it's pretty nice. The house always stays the same temperature no matter what, whether it's like hot out or cold out, it's always the same temperature, so it's awesome. um, yeah, I wish I did. I wish I knew a little bit more about the whole oil and fuel and the distribution of that and how that consumption rate goes, especially when it comes to the distribution of like natural gas going to like places like Europe, like diverting from the Asian nations and then going over to Europe. There is a lot that has taken place within that industry, and it's obviously going to cause a lot of problems. But yeah, I just don't know enough about it, man. I wish I did. Sorry, but thank you for the super chat, man. You're so awesome. I had a serious problem with alcohol. It was bad. Then I got with my girlfriend, life changing. I'm so much better. I don't feel like getting passed out drunk. Um, you know, I agree. Um, for me too, it was somebody in my life that had come in and had made a huge difference for me, and so a lot of times that's what it takes. A connection with another person that is like-minded and willing to kind of step forth with you, and you kind of lean on each other for support, and also like that. I don't know, like that expectation, like you don't want to disappoint, because because you kind of looked up to each other so much to see that support and encouragement, and it eventually just gets to a point where it's like you're not meeting an expectation as much as you're just enjoying the life that is, and there is no like expectation of it. Like you don't feel the need that you want to do it because you're just enjoying the life that you're experiencing at that point, so anyway. I know you see my comment. I'm sorry, man. I flipped through so many comments here. I just Fed is not killing jobs, but it is the income distribution which kills the jobs, and that is decided politically. Basically, mass unemployment is a result of long practiced right-wing policies. I disagree. All right. Here in the UK, household energy costs are about to increase by 80%. This is a price cap that the government controls. UK will enter a major depression this year. Here in the UK, household energy costs are about to increase by 80%. So, like, I think about that. Like when you have a particular portion of your costs that go up like that, I mean, I understand that a great deal of people, because I lived that way for a long time, live paycheck to paycheck. Like they cannot afford anything else. Like there is nothing left at the end of the month to have. Like there's no savings or anything coming from it. But when it comes to like people who are actually able to save, what they end up doing when you have like increases like that is they end up finding other places to start cutting expenses, right? They may not, go and release the car this year or something like, or get a new car this year. They may just drive the same old car, or they might switch from buying like fancy name brand food to buying generic food. They might, do things like instead of taking the trip to go, visit relatives once a month, they might cut that out of the equation and start saving in other ways to make up for it. Now, the hardest that hit are the people who just simply are at the end of their rope. Like this is it. They have nothing else that they can afford. Um, those are the people who get hit the hardest. So I don't feel that just because the price is going to go up like that is going to necessarily cause a depression, but it will certainly cause a lot of pain to people, and they'll have to cut their expenses in other places because of it. All right. Foreclosures aren't coming like people think. I agree with you, Matthew. I don't think the foreclosures are going to come like a lot of people are saying it's going to. I mean, you have to think like, why would there be foreclosures? It would be because there is, for one, like you would have to have massive unemployment, right? So people would have to be like majorly unemployed for them to not be making their payments on it. Well, there's a lot of jobs right now. So even if you did get laid off from like, a particularly high paying job, you can at least take another job out there or say multiple jobs and continue to make your house payment. May not be the funnest time in the world, but at least you might be able to still do something with it. Now, when it came to like the massive foreclosures that took place back in the great financial crisis, that was due to a lot of toxic assets out there. People were given loans that simply should not have had them, right? They could not afford them when they got them. So that is not the case today. The lending criteria, the standards are much higher nowadays than they were back then. And so the people who are getting loans are getting loans that are the people who are getting loans are going to those who are most likely going to be able to pay them. So it's not going to be like a wave of foreclosures that once happened. Not, at least not from what I can see yet. Now it could happen. I'm not saying it can't, because you should never say that something can't happen. But you got to look out there and say, okay, what's going to cause that? Where is the evidence of this happening? You can't just say, oh, I'm going to imagine this to take place and then expect it to take place. You got to look for the evidence of it. And, I haven't seen it yet. I mean, it's, signs of it are starting to show. You're starting to see prices come down. But again, they were coming down from an incredibly elevated position. So it's not a surprise to see prices come down, and they probably will come down substantially to meet the new normal, or at least not a new normal, but a normalish price, which is probably far below where they are today. All right. Let's see here. The US dollar and mortgages are related to each other. Government doesn't want to destroy the USD. Nobody wants to destroy the USD. Like, not a single person out there. Everybody is promised to get paid in US dollars. Why would you want the dollar to die? Like, if you're like, I mean, unless you're sitting completely in gold and silver, then you are sitting in a third party claim to get paid in dollars, right? No matter what it is. I mean, unless you're holding cash. I mean, unless you're holding cash or gold, then you are holding something that is going to promise to pay you in dollars. Why would you want to see the dollar get destroyed? Like, nobody wants to see the dollar destroyed. You can expect it to take place, and that is fine. I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't be fearful of it, but then you got to find the reasons why it's actually going to happen. And just because, like, you have nations like the BRICS nations and Russia and China and India and all these people who are doing trade in their own sovereign nation, it's not necessarily just because they don't want to deal in dollars, which is very much the case. I mean, they don't want to deal in dollars, and a lot of it has to do with like the sanctions that are taking place. But a lot of that also has to do with the fact that the dollar has gone so strong that it's hard to get dollars. The liquidity of dollars is it's drying up. It's very difficult, and people are scrambling to get them so that they can pay off their debts. And so if you are having troubles getting dollars because they're so strong, then you're probably going to figure out a way to do trade in some other currency. And that's really where the BRICS nations are going to start pushing that way, since they're already having the sanction issues and stuff like that. They don't like the dollar, and it just gives them the, I don't know, just gives them that, like, drive to go into something else anyway. Doesn't mean it's going to last. I mean, in my personal opinion, they are going to want dollars in the end, because that's what the rest of the world is going to want. Reason why they want it is because they want to get out of the dollar. They have to get the dollar first, and that's going to cause the dollar to strengthen. The dollar is strong. The dollar is going to continue to strengthen. You're going to see the dollar bubble before it dies, right? People are going to look at the dollar, and when you hear people saying, like, everybody should be saving in dollars, when you hear that, when you hear like the cabbie saying that, when you hear your neighbors talking that way, when you hear it on TV, that everybody should be having savings accounts and holding on to dollars and having as much cash position as they should be in, that's when you should get out. That's when you should be out of the dollar. All right. When the time comes, the Fed Reserve will loosen the money supply. Yeah, I mean, I believe that will be the case, but I think they're going to wait for a while. And I think we're going to see elevated interest rates for a substantial time going into the future. They said it's going to take pain. I mean, how often have you ever heard the Federal Reserve say that they were actually going to inflict pain? I mean, I mean, no wonder why the Dow dropped 1,000 points yesterday, right? I mean, that is credible threat, straight up. They are going to cause pain. But, eventually it'll get to a point where they will find their inflation expectations have been anchored at a reasonable rate. The average inflation rate will be around their 2%. And they will, adjust their monetary policy again. And at that point, you will find interest rates coming down. You will find like new industries taking off, especially like things moving into like the green movement, and a lot of investment will be taking place. All right. Are you and your family going to be okay if you lost your job in the coming recession? I mean, in what position? Like, it's not like I have like a ton of savings or anything like that. I mean, if I had a continued YouTube channel, I guess I could double up my efforts in YouTube and try and, make more money doing that. And that'd probably be okay. I'm know quite a bit of people, so I have a fairly decent network. I mean, I could probably find income doing side jobs and stuff like that. So I'm not like terribly concerned about like losing my job. The other thing about the position or the store that I work at is that it's owned outright. Like it's family owned. It's not owned by a bank. And so he could be the very last person at his store selling hardware, right? I mean, that's like, and if I'm good enough, maybe he'll keep me around. So it's not like I have to rely on like a corporation who might have like, this massive like, blanketing layoffs throughout all their stores or something like that. I mean, it's just this store, the owner, and us, all of us who work there. So you think the stock market will continue to decline next week? I think the stock market is going to continue to decline for the next couple of years. Like, I think there's stocks within the stock market that'll do okay. But as far as like just like watching the stock market just continually just, run its course and keep running up, I don't see that happening. I think there's going to be a stalling out, and it probably won't be very exciting to be in the stock market at all. I mean, maybe particular stocks might be exciting. There might be dividend paying stocks that you could take advantage of. But as far as like, just investing, like just, throwing a dart at the stock market and expecting that to go up, I don't think that's going to happen. And so next week, I mean, when you have a substantial sell-off, like 1,000 points in the Dow, then yeah, usually you have a correction the next day, the next time around. So I mean, I could see the Dow returning, like getting a lot of that back next week. Yeah. Simon, don't you think we should start investing when the stock hit rock bottom? I mean, why else are we holding on our cash? Well, where's rock bottom? How do you know? Right? I mean, that's that's like the $1 million question that everybody's looking for. Is like, where is that bottom? When do you start getting back in? And that's where, like, I don't know. Like, how do you predict that? I personally, I like dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin. That's like a really volatile, item. So you can just like dollar cost average into that one and watch it really ride up at times. But that's no way to really invest. I mean, investing is when you pick out a particular company and then you make, a conscious decision to buy into it at the right time. Um, I personally am going to follow that 5 year, 30 year. When I see that 5 year, 30 year spread, when I see that start to widen, then I'm going to start getting into stock market again. And I don't know, I might buy like total stock market ETF just because it's a lot easier than trying to pick out a particular stock. But as of right now, there's only one stock that I actually buy, and that's Altria. It's the ticker symbol MO. I'm not trying to promote that for any other reason than is to be like open with you guys about what I do. That is Marlboro cigarettes and Anheuser-Busch. I do not drink or smoke, but I know a little bit about addiction, and I really think that stock is probably going to stick around for a while as far as like the price increases that they have experienced. Depression usually gets a lot of people to start drinking and smoking more, and then if there's good times, people drink and smoke more. So no matter what, I think that stock is going to do well. But that's just me personally, and that's the only thing I'm really buying into. Like I said, once I see that 5 year, 30 year spread start to take off a little bit more, not a little bit more, once it starts doing it substantially, then I'll probably like, do like the blanket, just ETF purchases or something like that, where I buy into, the total stock market ETF or something like that. All right. He makes good money on YouTube. I can make okay money on YouTube. It does. I mean, I'm not gonna lie about it. It's, it can, I mean, it really varies. I mean, because it's never the same every month, and you can't predict how good it's gonna be. I mean, if like during the times when lumber was really taking off, my lumber videos were getting, 70, 80,000 views. Those videos were quite profitable. I mean, they did quite well. But, when you're only getting, say 10,000 views, then, the amount of ad revenue that comes with those is not nearly as good. So it's not like something that you can predict. And, how good I do the videos and how many I put out is also a pretty good indicator of it. But, yeah, like YouTube changed my life. I mean, I am not going to deny that. When you have 100,000 subscribers, it is quite significant, and it makes a huge difference. I mean, it got me out of debt. It got me the ability to put a down payment on a house. It's done a world of difference for me, and I can't thank you enough. I mean, I really can't. It's been life changing. You can move money from stocks to bonds as a safe haven, though I will stick to the DCA plan and buy the dip. Yeah. What's the ticker? The ticker is MO. If you're talking about the Altria, MO, like Mo, MO. Um, yeah, dollar cost averaging seems to be the best way to go about just about anything. Like, I am a terrible market timer. Like, when I think, oh, this is it, this is the time you want to get in, I will buy, and then you'll see the price drop even more. And, like, I don't know why that happens for me. Like, you would think, like, with as much as I follow the economy and stuff, that I would be a good market trader. But I think really being a market trader or an investor and being an economist are two completely different things. Like, they cross over. Like, the information and the data that you look at, and the stuff that you process is generally the same, but one person is trying to predict how to make money and the other one's trying to predict to be moving towards. And they're not really necessarily like the same thoughts. Like, some people are like, oh man, this is really going to do well, and they focus in on all the reasons why that's going to do well. And then other people are thinking of like the cause and effects from things. So it's not necessarily like, like if you put money towards something, you really want to see it happen. And so then you'll start looking at things in a way that will you'll start looking at things in a way that will confirm that thought, right? So if you want to see red, then you will go out there and you will find things that are red. Even if it's maroon or something like that, you'll think of it as being red. That's the problem when you start investing into things like that, is that you would want them to do well, and so therefore you would look at the environment as if it's going to do well because you are so wanting that to do well. If you're just an economist who says, I just look at the way things are and not really invested one way or the other, it goes up or down or sideways, doesn't really care, that's a whole different mindset, right? So cause and effects, and then somebody else who's like trying to figure out how to make money off of it. Even though it's kind of like the same information, it's not necessarily the same thoughts going into it. Thank you very much, Matthew. Man, you are loading me up today with the super chats. I really appreciate it, man. That is so awesome. Many people believe that Wall Street is trying to get out of real estate because they stopped buying in 38 cities. They stopped buying, they aren't selling, they are still buying in 50 other metro Wall Street will still buy houses. Yeah, I think that's going to be the case for quite some time. Even thinking about it from like the Cantillon effect, Richard Cantillon said that there's no better way of seeing how much of an abundance of money there is in a system than seeing the rents go up. And if the rents are going up, then that's profit. That's profit for people who are owning homes. And if you are a Wall Street investor, then you're going to start buying into those homes, watching the rents go up. And that seems to be the case right now. Now, I mean, granted, I have read quite a bit of articles where saying that rents are now no longer increasing at the dramatic rate, but still they're quite elevated, and that's profit to be had. And I just, again, like what Matthew is saying there's so much demand coming from the investor side of things. I just don't know where the house prices are going to fall that much. If they do start to drop, people on the Wall Street side of things are going to nab them up and rent them out because there's huge demand for rentals out there. All right, I can't believe that you bought a house at the top of the market. Well, I mean, did you watch my videos during the time? I really didn't have a choice. Like, I didn't want to. I tried not to. I was looking for places to rent. There is literally no place in Astoria to rent at the time, and even today it's still difficult. So I had no choice. Like, I had to buy a house, and it took everything out of me to do it. Now, in the end, I'm glad I did it. And to be perfectly honest with you, like the price of the house, like the Zillow estimate of it has gone up like well over 20%. So with the substantial down payment that they made me put on the house and the ridiculous increase that it has gone up in price, that even if it was to take like a 25% hit right now, I would still not be underwater on my house. So yeah, I might have bought it at the height of the market, which doesn't feel comfortable, but I really didn't buy it at the height. Jesus, I really didn't buy it at the height of the market if it continued to go up, right? If I can sell it now for a profit, right? So I bought it towards the height of the market, but it continued to go up. And even still, like today, even with the higher interest rates, it's still up, elevated on the Zillow estimates. I have a sneaking suspicion that Pacific Northwest area is going to be a place of high demand, especially if you have like the drought issues continuing into the next few years, or even the next 10, 12, 15, 20 years, whatever, like, however long decade this drought goes on for. It could cause the Pacific Northwest to be one of the most pleasant places to be, because we have access to a lot of water, considering that it falls from the sky 90% of the time. So anyway, I do feel bad, like not feel great about the purchase, but I don't necessarily feel bad about it. All right, economy is not so much math. Economy is about politics. I disagree. I don't think the economy has anything to do with politics. I think politics has a lot to do with the economy. But I think a lot of the stuff that happens within the economy or within politics, I think is like just more of a side note to the actual effects coming from the economy. And that's another thing, not to bring up Cantillon stuff, but you know me, I've only really read a couple of things on economics. Uh, in Cantillon's essay is one of them, but he even says in there that when the abundance of money starts flowing through the system, that all these politicians and stuff, they start making a bunch of noise, and they start like raising monuments to their to their efforts and stuff like that, but they really have very little impact on the outcome of things, like what is going to take place to the people once the flow of new money stops and everybody starts falling into poverty. It doesn't really matter who was in political office at the time. Everybody suffers from that, and it's going to take place. Like, it doesn't matter if you have Republicans or Democrats in the system. This is something that's beyond their control. This is a cycle that is going to take place, and if you want to blame one party or the other, that's fine, but you're going to miss out on the real problem, because that's more of a symptom of the problem, not the problem itself. Right? And there is no problem. It's just the situation. Like, a problem is only for people who don't see it coming. Like, it's like the tide or something like that. It's like, it goes up and down. I mean, if you didn't expect it to go up or down, then that would be a problem. But if you expect it, then it's not a problem, right? All right, down to man, Matthew, you're just loading me up today, man. I really appreciate it. It's all about your payment and interest rate. Fixed 30-year debt, rent's only going up. You nailed it. Yeah, and that's true. Like, even now, like if I was to try and buy the house, I don't know if I would be able to get it. Like, the payment might be too high for my income. Um, well, I guess not if I included the YouTube stuff, which I think I did do when I got the house. So I guess that's not true. I'd probably still qualify for it, but not off of my regular income. I mean, I didn't qualify for the house. I mean, I did. No, I think I had to use my YouTube income. I did, to in order to qualify for the house. So I don't know if I would qualify for the payment now if I was to try and buy the house today, with the interest rates as high as they are. And then watching like some of the rents, I mean, even right now, like the rent would be like on the average house around here would probably still be higher than the payment on the house that I'm living in now, even with the higher interest rates on it. Because like house rents around here are like literally like $3,000 a month. They're just stupid high. So you could buy a pretty expensive house, with a $3,000 a month payment, and that's really like, I think that's really the case, is that you can still buy a house cheaper than you can rent one if you can come up with the down payment. All right, rent in Seattle is becoming insane. West Seattle, 2.4 thousand for a one bedroom. Man, oh man. Yeah, I remember, like, I mean, I hear these one bedroom studio places. Somebody was telling me about that they're going for like $900, $900 a month. And I think, man, for a dinky little studio basement apartment, you got to pay $1,000 a month. Josh, what did I say? Josh says he'll be back maybe Monday. Let's see here. I had a car lot in 2008. My floor plan got frozen and I was in really good standing. Housing crash, people. We have nowhere near the excess inventory in 2008 as in 2008. Declining prices, sure. Utter collapse, not nah, not likely unless we have a depression. Yeah, and that's again, like, I just don't see the situation in which that we're going to have a collapse. Like, I could definitely see prices coming down, especially like the like prices like in my area, Seattle, Portland, LA, these places that had like these really high increases. If you see the prices like coming down dramatically there, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's taking place throughout the rest of the nation. You could find places where maybe it wasn't a incredibly hot housing market. You may not see the prices fluctuate much at all. Like, it just doesn't really go anywhere. And even though you see like, I thought about this one too, even though you see like a lot of inventory on the market right now, or at least a building up of inventory, I know a lot of people who have houses on the market. Well, shouldn't say a lot of people. I know some people who have houses on the market right now who are trying to take advantage of the high prices. And like, I don't know if they necessarily even really want to give up these homes, but they would give them up for a high price right now. So if the prices begin to fall and fall dramatically, we could see where a lot of people are like, never mind, I'm going to take this off the market and just rent it out. Like, we don't know how many people have houses on the market, increasing the inventory, who are just trying to take advantage of the high prices. And once the high prices go away, so will the inventory. You see where I'm kind of getting at? Like, they're not desperate sellers, they're greedy sellers, and the greed might come out of it once the price does too. Hey, thank you very much, Mark, for the 4.99. Roll the dice. All right. Thank you very much for the 4.99. I appreciate it, man. All right. Watch the inventory chart from 2005 to 2010. Yeah, it's increasing. Let's see. Renters suck. Yeah, I can believe that, but it's a two-way street on that one. So the housing price crash is a result. There is no money with buyers. That leads it all back to pricing of work. If purchasing power goes lower and lower, it eventually plummets. Also, housing market. Yeah. Prices will come down at the same rate interest rates go up. I don't think so. Like, I mean, we saw interest rates dramatically rise like 3, 4 months ago on the mortgages, but we haven't seen the same dramatic drop in prices. We saw a stalling out in prices, and we've seen some places coming down and some places coming down fairly decently, but we haven't seen like a dramatic crashing in the housing market because of it. And it's not even like, I mean, that was a significant rise in interest rates, but it wasn't a significant drop in prices. It was just a stalling out of prices from that significant increase of interest rates. It's a bit like monopolies, like fail because one guy decided to undercut. That is correct, Stacy. Huh. Calling 7 on the dice. All right. What is it? I think there's only 1% of people that are millionaires. The majority of people make $70,000 a year. Shit, I don't even think they make that much. I don't even think they make that much a year. All right, so what makes you think that this is attainable? I wonder, I'm not sure what that is. What is attainable? All right. If someone wants to sell their house at high price first. Okay, thoughts on student loan forgiveness. Oh, I kind of talked a little bit about that one. Again, like, I don't think the forgiveness is like, even the amount that they're talking about, I don't think is going to have a significant impact on anything other than creating a situation that changes the perception of the people. Like, Students hardly, like, I mean, already they're not making their payments as it is, so it's not like that's going to give them a bunch of money that they get to go spend into the economy because they're not making their payments anyhow. But then on top of it, it's kind of more about the future students taking out debt, and that they don't want to scare them to the point that they don't want to burden them with the student loan debt, because that's exactly what's happening. Like, if you were a kid who's growing up watching, your older brothers or maybe, family relatives and stuff like that who have taken out this student loan debt, and now they have this average job, but they have a degree that they're not using, and there's, they're suffering under the weight of this debt because of it, of the student loan debt, they may not be so eager to go out there and try to get a degree. But if you wipe out a bunch of this debt, then it's just like, oh, well, hell, that carrot does dangle out there in front. And so maybe I will go off and, continue to, try and pursue a degree or something like that. So I don't think it's necessarily like going to help the economy or the people in any really significant way. I mean, even if it does relieve like a lot of your debt, like, to have like $10,000 was like all your student loan debt, then what kind of encouragement does that do for you and the paying off of debt going into the future? Like, one of the hardest things that I had to overcome was a significant credit card debt that I had. And getting out of that taught me a lesson about going back into debt, and having to pay that off was what taught that lesson. If you don't learn that lesson, then what's going to prevent you from like damaging yourself going into the future with more debt, more credit card debt or car loan debt or whatever? I mean, having this $10,000 wiped out, and just saying you don't have to pay it or something like that, that is very damaging to you personally in your psyche, right? And how you handle your finances going into the future. It might be an awesome benefit for the moment, and you might be partying because of it, but in the end, it's not good for you. Paying off your debts and learning the lessons from it, that's what gives you the lessons and the skills in order to like progress with security and ability going into the future. That's really what it comes down to. Is there any realistic way to hold the Fed accountable? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. $10,000 isn't impactful to the majority of loans. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, $10,000 when you don't have it is like an insane amount of money. Like, it is like so much money, especially if somebody out of the blue comes up and says, "Hey, guess what? You need to come up with $10,000." That is like, if you don't have it or have any way of getting it, that is like, it's like it might as well be $1,000,000. It's just so much. But in the grand scheme of things, $10,000 is really not that much money. It's really like a drop in the bucket over your lifetime of how much money that you'll end up earning and spending and dealing with. $10,000 is not that much. And I mean, how it is that that's supposed to be like impactful, I don't know. I mean, I don't get it. So let's see here. 1,000% interested in pricing citizens out of housing. Yeah. I hear a dog howling out there in the distance. Okay. How much did billionaire class in China and other countries increase during the scamdemic? 40, 60%? Well, yeah. I mean, if you have all your money in the stock market, and then everybody gives you, then governments stimulate the economy with a bunch of checks, and then they go and stick it in the stock market, how much money are those billionaires going to get? All right. Housing will be cheap within 5 years when people demand cash, realize it isn't there, and the nearest offer for your mansion is $20,000 cash. You'll have to pay taxes on the $10,000 at star level. Astoria soundscape. It is not a problem for the people that don't pay their student loans. It's a problem for us taxpayers. Pretty sweet for me. I have like 60,000 total in student debt. A good case study is how watch markets crash. Okay, let's see. What time is it? Oh, shoot. I'm losing my phone here. What time is it? It is 1:29. All right, guys. I'll probably give it... How much power do I have? 20%. I'll probably give it like another 15 minutes. And then I'm going to jet out and go hang out with the boys and my wife. I look at the student loan deal as an investment in American education, but I am not for doing any more for student debt. I mean, I understand getting the education. Like, I have nothing against it. I think anybody who wants to further their education and become, smarter in whatever it is that they want, that is so perfect and cool. I think that's great. What I don't seem to understand is the forced idea upon the kids that they need to get a degree or they're going to somehow be losers in life. Like, that part just drives me nuts because I am surrounded, so is my wife, with people who have degrees. We don't. My wife and I do not have degrees, right? My wife, no matter where she works, and it doesn't matter if she tries or not, like tries to do it or not, she always ends up in a middle management position right away. Like, she is management style quality employee. When she works anywhere, she works at as if she owns it. She's worked for multiple business owners, and the people who generally it's like restaurant industry kind of things, but any place that she has ever worked, the people have always asked if she's an owner of the company because that's how she works it. And no matter where she works, she ends up going into a management style position of things. She didn't go to school. She doesn't have any business management degree. She just has an insane amount of experience doing it, and she was hardcore when she did the work. So I'm the same way. Like, I mean, I've worked many places, doing retail work where the people around me, many of them had degrees. Like, they'd gone to school, got this degree, but they're not doing work in the field that they had studied. And I know it's because so many people have degrees out there. It's just like, everybody went and got one, but not necessarily everybody needs one. And I just like I don't have any problem with people like becoming more educated. Just like do something with that education. It's not like just go get the degree just to have one. That doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I learned all about economics for free, right? I mean, I just like Google will teach you anything you want to know if you want to know about it. But to be forced into going into lifelong worth of debt to do it, I don't see the point in that. Thank you very much, Jason, for the $6.99. If the U.S. debt will never be repaid, why do people still trust the dollar? Well, I don't think you have any other choice, right? Like, I mean, there's no other choice. I mean, what is it that there's nothing else out there to possibly use? So if there was another currency, like if you wanted to use another nation's currency, it would just be a version of the same thing. I mean, it's still a fiat currency. Now, we did have a gold standard, but it didn't, it ended, right? I mean, it was a temporarily put on hold and it just never came back. So the idea that we're going to go back to like a gold standard for a currency, it's just not going to take place. People don't trust it, but then again, they don't really have anything else. And since most people don't really understand the system anyway, they wouldn't know not to trust it. They know that it works when they go down to use it, and so as long as it continues to work, then they don't really have any business in learning why it wouldn't work or why it shouldn't work or why they shouldn't hold it. Um, this is what they get paid in and what they're asked to pay taxes in, and so that's what they're going to use. All right, I want a bail-in so I can go finish my degree. Might as well finish this and go for a CPA. Comp science is mind-numbing. YouTube, the new college. Learn anything for free if you have the motivation. Well, yeah. Like, yeah, you can learn anything you want. Like, I mean, you can learn how to be a mechanic. You can work on, engines, or you can learn language. You can learn anything you want. Like, anything you want. It's just like, if your mind's interested in it, you can go and just keep researching, and there's plenty of people out there who will talk about it. And if you just do it over and over and over again for months, you'll eventually become good at it. Like, I mean, I never read books on economics ever, but I read a lot of Federal Reserve speeches and I've read a lot of documents coming from the Federal Reserve. I've listened to a lot of people on YouTube talk about their opinions on what's going on in the economy, and I've read a lot of news articles, a lot of Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg. After you start doing this enough, pretty soon you got a feel for the economy and you can talk about it. Much like a mechanic can kind of understand what's going on with an engine, I kind of get what's going on with the economy and I get to talk about it. I mean, I don't know anything about, you know, dental hygiene or something like that, but I do have some friends who know a lot about dental hygiene, and she actually makes some money talking about dental hygiene. So, I mean, that's their niche. It's just like whatever it is that you know about and want to know more about. Informal educated economist. Beekeeping. I bought bees and they taught me. Yeah, same thing. My buddy caught a swarm, had them in a 5-gallon bucket, and says, "Hey, we need a hive." And so my wife just took off driving towards Portland and stopped at every hardware store and farm feed store until she found a beehive, and that's how we started bees. And we had bees for quite a few years, and then we had like a hive collapse issue take place where all the bees died. But it was fun. We had them for quite a few years. It was a nice, fun hobby to do. And same thing. I didn't know anything about bees, so I was just like all over the internet, YouTube, watching people, listening to people talk about beekeeping. I got a degree in economics from an uneducated economist. I can even print a piece of paper that says so. Work from home is drying up for a lot of employees after Labor Day. Many Fortune 500 companies are on the same page with this timeline. Let's see how this affects the jobs market. Yeah, money is like the grease that keeps the wheel spinning. Will it spin without it? Yeah, but it will be difficult if it doesn't seize. Yep, exactly. Yeah, monetary systems have never been chosen. Was always out of necessity, not rational intended decision making. Yeah. Simon knows more about economics than most people in Washington. Well, I don't know if I necessarily know more about economics. I just look at it much differently than most people do, because most people were taught economics, right? So they got like this base idea on how economics works, and then they started building off this base. I never had a base to begin with. Like, I didn't like grow up thinking like, okay, understanding Keynesian economics or understanding Austrian economics. I didn't like learn that way. I just kind of took like this shotgun approach to it all. It was like, oh, what's that? Oh, what's that? Oh, okay. What are you guys talking about? And that's how I kind of just took all this information in. So whether I'm like, drifting into Keynesian thought or Austrian economics or whatever, it's just like I never took like a base form of thought on how economics should work or why certain things are taking place. I don't like base it off of this decision or this base idea of economics. I just kind of do it off of this free flowing idea of all these ideas that are out there. And so when it comes to economics, I'm not like approaching it from a direction. I'm just kind of looking at it from like a different level, I guess, or from a different perspective. Like everybody's looking at it from that hill, I'm looking at it from this hill, kind of thing, or not even from a hill. I'm looking at it from like a drone, And then some people can see it from like really high distance. Like, some of these people who are really good economists, they see it like from a very high distance. Like, George Gammon, he says it's like from a 30,000-foot level. Like that's how he sees things. Or it's not necessarily him, but some of the guys within his group. These guys have an insane amount of money. They know how to play the game to make more money. That's like an investment level that is much different from what average people are going to be participating in. So they see it much differently than people who are like working class like we do. Like I see things from the ground perspective, and that's why George really liked my channel and liked my view on things, is because I had this boots on the ground talking about like real-time perspective on what was happening within the lumber industry. That's something that those guys don't have. They have to wait for the data to come out in order to see that kind of stuff. we have first access to that kind of thing. So when it comes to being like an economist like I am, or like want to be, I guess I should say, because I'm not necessarily an economist, I just want to be an economist. But being that kind and looking at it from a different level, like I'm not looking at it from a base, I'm looking at it from just this like blanket view, and I'm looking at it from the working class position, not from like an investment banking finance position. So it's a much different view than like what most people who talk this kind of level of economics is seeing, and that's the reason why I think I have a niche, is because it fits in much better with the working class people out there who are basically in that same position as I am, not, sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars wondering how it is that they're going to be buying, a 50 house complex or something like that. It's like, I mean, we don't think on that kind of level of stuff. All right, I think my phone is running out of power here, and I'm going to go visit my wife here in about 5 minutes. So let's answer a question or two, and then we're going to call it a day. Thank you, everybody who's been here. If you shut out before I finish. Both commercial banks and central banks create new money as debt. They never had the money, even the fractional part not always there. Yeah, and that's why I describe inflation as the expansion of money and credit. Like, credit is part of it. Without, like, if you were to pay off all the debts, that's something like to try and wrap your head around. If you were to pay off all the debts out there, all the student loan debts, all the credit card debts, housing debt, government debt, all debts were paid off. Like, there is no more debt. The dollar would cease to exist. There would not be a dollar, right? In fact, the dollar would cease to exist before you could pay off all the debt, and then there would still be debt to be owed. So that's something to kind of think about, that there is no way that there could ever be a way that we could pay off all the debt, and if we did, there would be no money in the system. So the more money, the more debt. The more debt, the more money. Oh, wow, man, right on. Thank you so much for the 100. What is that, 100 Canadian? Thank you, Stephen. From Mike Martin's Cult. Great show. Take care, sir. Wow, man. Thank you so much. And yeah, if you guys, I mean, I thank you for the Mike Martin shout out too. He's an awesome dude. Mike Martin's has, I mean, that guy was like one of the first people to give me a shout out. He was the first person to invite me on for an interview. And I really feel that the channel took off after after I talked with Mike, after he kind of took me onto a show and said, hey man, let's have you on, let's talk about some of your ideas. It was after that the channel really started taking off. So I owe Mike a great big thank you for that. I mean, I've told him thank you many times, and he's he always waves it off like, hey, no worries about it. But he is really what I feel gave the channel the boost that it needed to take off. So I can't thank him enough. UE, bingo. Country can't get rid of debt. Nope, it can't. It will not happen, cannot. UE, do you think the need for 87,000 additional IRS personnel? I don't know. I don't know if that's just a credible threat out there, to put this big giant number out there to scare the hell out of everybody, to make them behave in a certain direction or something like that. I don't know. I mean, that seems like an awful lot to try and track down. How much investment does it take, or how much return on investment would you get from hiring 87,000 IRS agents? That's the question that I think would really have to be asked and answered for that, because I just don't see it. I think it's more of a credible threat kind of thing. All right, cool old-fashioned free market economics text. Alclean, I can't say it. Allen's Exchange and Production University Economics. I see there's a newer final collaboration titled Universal Economics. Huh. Next streaming when? I don't know. Maybe I'll try and set these things up to be a little bit more regular. Maybe Saturdays or something like that. Hopefully I'll have Saturdays off on a regular time, but I wanted to start doing more stuff with the family on Saturdays. So I don't know if I can narrow it down to a regular time like that. Maybe we can find some time during the week to do a regular live stream, so that like I said, so that it will be a set time that we all know that we can come onto the show and have these discussions. But as far as like my live streams, I just kind of randomly do them. Like you just kind of hope that you're in a time that you can catch it, because I just kind of do it whenever and I feel bored or have some free time to do it. So that's when it's going to happen. But I'll think about it and try and set up a live stream time for a regular show. Um, the best economists are hired by Wall Street Annex. All right, why don't you do your stream at a desk in your house so your camera stops falling down? um, because I don't have good internet access at the house. They have, where I'm at, the only thing that's available right now is dial-up. I have signed up for Starlink, put the down payment so that I can get my Starlink when it becomes available, which they say is going to happen here at early 2023, so maybe 4 to 6 months away, maybe. If that's the case, then I will start trying to figure out how to do interviews, because I'm thinking I want to do more interview stuff. The one I did with Keto turned out pretty well, but the way I had to set that up was I had a buddy of mine record the interview, the Zoom meeting from his apartment, up here in Astoria, and then he included the two of us in the meeting and just took himself out and recorded the meeting that way. So it worked out okay, but I would rather have it all set up so I could do it myself, and I can't really do that from my house right now. So anyway, that's the reason why I do them like this. All right, we need Simon to be part of the Federal Reserve Board. A lot of people have said that. It would be fun to be on the board of governors like that, to do like economic decision making and stuff like that. But I think what I do here is far more important. Being in the working class job, understand the level of economics that I do, and trying to spread the message and the word and have the conversation out there, and hoping that other people can pick up on this, on this knowledge and on this idea, and really, to me, a very interesting topic that most people just find incredibly boring. But I think it's more important that I do this kind of thing than trying to get into, say, working finance, working for bankers, or even doing politics or something like that. I think this is better for me, my family, and for everything, So, all right, I'm going to head out. Uneducated Economist, thank you, everybody. Thank you all for the super chats. Thank you all for the kind words and all the great comments, and for liking the video and everything that you do for me and the channel. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.